Welcome to Fiction Audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, like and subscribing would be greatly appreciated. If you have any recommendations for novels, comment below.
Please join my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/fictionaudiobook.
Chapter 168, Madara's Anger. It seemed as if the Uzumaki clan member had heard Kazuki's words, as a flicker of light passed through her eyes, and she stared intently at Kazuki. Don't worry, this time, Kirigakure will definitely pay a heavy price. Kazuki was actually a bit puzzled. Logically, Madara shouldn't harbor such hatred towards the Uzumaki clan. The destruction of Uchiha should have been enough to achieve Madara's goal. He had a vessel for the Rinnegan, eliminated a strong Uchiha, and obtained a rather good pair of Mangekyo Sharingan. However, Kazuki still didn't know what Kagami's Mangekyo Sharingan ability was. He would have to ask Hiruzen if he had the chance. As the third Hokage, Hiruzen should know, right? Soon, Kazuki thought of something else. Could Madara be trying to force Mito to her death? Previously, the only one in the ninja world who posed even a slight threat to Madara was Mito. As for whether there was a life and death feud between Mito and Madara, of course, there was. Perhaps in Mito's heart, they were once good friends, but now Mito had no doubt that Madara wanted to kill her. And it was normal for Madara to be dissatisfied with Mito. After all, there was the hatred of having a husband stolen between them, wasn't there? It was normal for him to want to kill Mito. However, to harbor such hatred for the Uzumaki clan as well, was something Kazuki hadn't expected. These guys from Kirigakure clearly treated this Uzumaki clan member as an experimental subject. If they wanted to cultivate her as a Jinchuriki, they wouldn't have severed her tendons and hamstrings, nor would they have left her looking neither human nor ghost-like. The woman opened her mouth but said nothing, yet Kazuki believed he understood her. I beg you. People who lose their homes are miserable. At points like this, even death is a release. Kazuki walked up to the woman, scanned her from head to toe, paying particular attention to the seals. He had to admit, these sealing jutsu were quite advanced. Although they were still significantly different from Mito's, they were far superior to those of an ordinary ninjas. If Kazuki hadn't received guidance from Mito, he probably wouldn't have been able to recognize these sealing jutsu. But now, although he wasn't the most proficient in sealing jutsu, his sealing jutsu was among the best in Konoha. He quickly formed hand signs, slapped the woman's abdomen, and chakra surged wildly. Accompanied by a roar, the Three-Tails body suddenly appeared in Kirigakure. Face me. Kazuki let out a cold snort, and in an instant, the Three-Tails was controlled by him. Then, a playful smile appeared on his face. Interesting, did Madara leave a contingency on the Three-Tails? Kazuki remembered that in the future, Obito had even controlled the fourth Mizukage. At that time, the fourth Mizukage had the Three-Tails inside him, and the Three-Tails was most likely controlled by Madara, which allowed Obito to control the fourth Mizukage in that manner. However, the ocular power Madara left on the Three-Tails was not difficult for Kazuki to break. With just a surge of ocular power, he easily broke it, and then manipulated the Three-Tails to release a tailed beast ball. Oh no, what is that? The Three-Tails. The Three-Tails has broken out. Look, there's someone on the Three-Tails' head. That's Kazuki. He's here. Quickly go and summon third Mizukage-sama. Mizukage-sama is not in the village. The moment the Three-Tails appeared, it immediately caught the attention of Kirigakure residents, and fear arose in countless hearts. There was no other way. The Three-Tails chakra was not something an ordinary person could compare to, and such a colossal creature made countless people feel pressured. Perhaps the Three-Tails' strength might only be at the Kage level, but its destructive power against ordinary ninjas was far beyond that of Kage-level experts. And at this moment, many people in Kirigakure began to despair, unaware that Kazuki was seething with rage. That Uzumaki clan member had been killed. Although he had released her from her suffering, and they were strangers, Kazuki's heart could not settle down. At the same time, it further strengthened his resolve to change this world. Because Kazuki and the Three-Tails' appearance had attracted Kirigakure's attention, Mikoto and Minato, among others, quickly moved through Kirigakure, heading towards the location Kazuki had sensed. On the other side, the moment Kazuki broke the ocular power within the Three-Tails, Madara, thousands of miles away, instantly sensed it. He widened his eyes, revealing an expression of disbelief. Madara? What's wrong? Black Zetsu cautiously asked Madara. The Three-Tails has been released. Madara said in a low voice. Black Zetsu fell silent. So what if the Three-Tails was released? The plan's time hadn't arrived yet, and the Rinnegan still needed to gestate. It was far from time. Whatever happened to the Three-Tails now, even if it died, Black Zetsu wouldn't care too much. They had enough time for the Three-Tails to revive. The ocular power I left on the Three-Tails has been broken. Then, Madara's words made Black Zetsu unable to remain calm. Is it Kazuki? Black Zetsu asked anxiously. It should be Kazuki. Madara's eyes turned cold. I never thought this brat would become such a major threat to us. Kazuki's growth had always been observed by Madara. He suspected that Kazuki had awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, and moreover, his chakra seemed to be incredibly abundant. Madara had also suspected whether Mito had done something to Kazuki's body. Could it be that Kazuki also merged with Hashirama's cells? If that were the case, many things could be explained, but the more it was so, the more Madara couldn't remain calm. If this continued, would Kazuki awaken the Rinnegan? How should we deal with Kazuki? Black Zetsu asked cautiously. Kazuki was troublesome, but didn't they still have Madara on their side? The question was how much of Hagoromo's memories Kazuki possessed. Chapter 169, Black Zetsu's accurate judgment. How is Fugaku growing? Madara hesitated for a moment before asking. Previously, Madara thought that considering Kazuki had no siblings, and Kagami's Mangekyo Sharingan was in his hands, even if Kazuki was powerful, he would eventually go blind in the future and could not truly grow. But if he transplanted Hashirama's cells, would he still go blind? Even if his ocular power might not be comparable to his own eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, and he couldn't activate the perfect Susanoo, a Mangekyo Sharingan that wouldn't go blind was still very troublesome. He has already awakened the 3-Tomo Sharingan and is proficient in its use. Moreover, he has a good relationship with his cousin. I suspect that once he dies, there's a high chance he could awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan. Black Zetsu paused before adding, Fugaku is a very loving Uchiha. He places the Uchiha clan in a very high regard, which seems to differ from Kazuki. Black Zetsu prided himself on his accurate judgment of people. Kazuki had been by Mito's side since childhood. Although he grew up within the Uchiha clan, in reality, Kazuki might not value the Uchiha clan that much, which was very similar to the current Madara. Back then, Madara cared about the Uchiha clan, but was he truly suited to be the Uchiha clan head? He really wasn't. At least Susanoo was much more suitable than Madara. Of course, Madara did fight for the Uchiha clan, but that was for his Uchiha clan. His father was the former Uchiha clan head, and Madara later became the next clan head. Madara had always treated the Uchiha clan as his own possession. Therefore, when he agreed to reconcile with Hashirama, the Uchiha clan also had to let go of their millennium-long blood feud with the Senju clan. In many people's eyes, Madara was a traitor to the Uchiha clan. Yes, you are the clan head, your strength is great, and we can't defeat the Senju clan, but you directly reconciled with Hashirama, so what about those clansmen who sacrificed themselves in bloody battles against the Senju clan? Was their sacrifice in vain? It was from that time that Madara gradually lost the support of the Uchiha clan. It could be said that Madara did not understand how to manage a clan. Without Izuna, he could not manage the Uchiha clan. But Fugaku was different. Black Zetsu could feel that Fugaku genuinely cared about his clan, and also about his cousin. In this regard, he was much better than Madara, but Black Zetsu would not say it, as he was still outwardly Madara's will. He couldn't possibly speak ill of himself, could he? He's 15 now, isn't he? It's time for him to awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan. Since he understands love, it's also time for Fugaku to lose love. Madara's eyes flashed with a cold glint as he said, since the Mizukage and the Six Tails are both on the front line, it's time to launch an attack on the Konoha army. Since Kazuki is controlling the Three Tails in battle, we can also have the Six Tails do something. As you wish, Madara-sama. Black Zetsu did not refuse upon hearing this. In fact, he was somewhat puzzled in his heart. Kazuki was actually controlling the Three Tails to wreak havoc in the Kirigakure, this wasn't logical at all. Was this still Hagoromo? Black Zetsu wouldn't doubt it if Indra did something like this, but if it was done by Hagoromo, Black Zetsu felt he couldn't believe it. The reincarnations of Indra Chakra are arrogant, believing that power can solve all problems. The reincarnations of Asura Chakra are generally kinder and believe in love. But why was Hagoromo's chakra reincarnation becoming more and more like Indra? Could it be that Hagoromo's usual display of peace-loving nature was actually a disguise? My foolish brother, you've finally shown your true colors, haven't you? As for scheming against Fugaku, a scheme is a scheme. He was already their target anyway. They just hoped Fugaku could awaken a relatively powerful ocular jutsu. Kazuki had no idea that Madara had quickly reacted and was preparing to have the Six Tails and the Mizukage act. At this moment, he was controlling the Three Tails, fighting and causing destruction within Kirigakure. Roar! The Three Tails opened its massive maw, and terrifying chakra gathered in its mouth, forming a huge black energy sphere rapidly. Oh no, it's a tailed beast ball. Seeing the Three Tails condensing a tailed beast ball, the Kirigakure ninja's ball attacked the Three Tails. They absolutely could not allow the tailed beast ball to explode within Kirigakure, otherwise, Kirigakure wouldn't even need to continue fighting the Second Great Ninja War. It might not even exist afterward. And just as the Kirigakure ninjas were attacking the Three Tails, Kazuki stomped his feet, and the Three Tails, which was already covered in a carapace, gained another layer of armor. This was majestic attire, Susanoo. The Kirigakure ninja's attacks couldn't even damage the Susanoo. It seems easier than I thought. This was Kazuki's first time using majestic attire, Susanoo. The only tailed beast he had been able to access before was the Nine Tails, but he couldn't possibly extract the Nine Tails from Mito's body and then use majestic attire, Susanoo, could he? And when majestic attire, Susanoo was formed, Kazuki could clearly feel that the Susanoo and the tailed beast resonated, as if Susanoo was naturally born for tailed beasts. No wonder Madara with majestic attire, Susanoo, could fight toe-to-toe with Hashirama. Such an effect allows for the unleashing of greater power. In the future, when Naruto activates Ninetales chakra mode and cooperates with Sasuke's Susanoo, they can even fight an Otsutsuki. Sasuke could use his Susanoo as a container for the tailed beast's chakra, which demonstrated the compatibility between Susanoo and tailed beasts. Just like now, Kazuki felt that with the cooperation of the Three Tails, he could easily use perfect Susanoo, though it might be quite draining for the Three Tails. Chapter 170, Natural Disaster. The resonance between Susanoo and the tailed beast was something Kazuki hadn't expected. While controlling the Three Tails, he was also observing its chakra. He had already studied the Nine Tails chakra, and this time, he would collect some of the Three Tails chakra. If he had the chance in the future, he would strive to collect and study the chakra of all nine-tailed beasts. This was a must-do. Kazuki was using this opportunity to try and acquire the power of the Truth-Seeking Orb. For a Six Paths level powerhouse, the Truth-Seeking Orb was quite necessary. He could attempt to use external power, such as the Ten Tails power, to condense the Truth-Seeking Orb, or he could condense it using his own strength. The Truth-Seeking Orb was not merely yin-yang release, it required mastery of the so-called yin-yang 5 elements power to be condensed. Of course, this so-called mastery of yin-yang 5 elements definitely didn't mean you could do it just by mastering these elemental chakras. Even if you mastered the nature transformation of 5 elements and the so-called yin-yang release, you would only have touched the surface. It could be said that it was almost impossible for a normal person to condense a truth-seeking orb. Without enough chakra, even if one knew the method, they might not even be able to condense a single one. Even with Hashirama's chakra, being able to condense 3 or 4 truth-seeking orbs was probably his limit. Then, let's turn the world upside down. Kazuki's face was filled with excitement. A tailed beast ball with a diameter of about 5 or 6 meters was condensed by the Three Tails. To be fair, Kazuki was a bit disappointed. Nine Tails could create a tailed beast ball of this size without even batting an eye, almost instantly. Yet, when it came to Three Tails, it required so much effort, consumed so much chakra, and took so long to create just one tailed beast ball. The gap between tailed beasts was indeed not small. Boom. The enormous tailed beast ball was spat out by the Three Tails, landing right in the center of Kirigakure. A massive mushroom cloud soared into the sky, and terrifying shockwaves spread in all directions. A sense of despair permeated the hearts of the Kirigakure ninjas, as this was clearly the first time Kirigakure had been attacked by a tailed beast, causing many Kirigakure residents to start cursing. Why did the Three Tails appear in the village? It was known that to ensure Kirigakure's safety, the Three Tails and Six Tails had been arranged on a small island outside the village, but now they were unleashed within the village. Any normal person could detect the trickery involved. Did Kazuki specifically bring it to Kirigakure, or was the Three Tails already in Kirigakure? However, at this moment, they had no time for other concerns. They had to stop the Three Tails, even if it meant sacrificing their lives. Otherwise, just one Three Tails could probably shatter Kirigakure. What a pity. Looking at the giant crater, about 30 meters in diameter, blasted by the tailed beast ball, Kazuki's face showed regret. Three Tails was not strong enough. If it were Nine Tails, it could definitely blast a giant crater 50 or 60 meters in diameter, or even a 100-meter deep pit, without much difficulty. Never mind, let's make a big ruckus. Red light flickered in Kazuki's eyes. As the Three Tails let out another roar, it arched its entire body, wrapping its heavy shell around itself, and rolled forward like a wheel, continuously tumbling through Kirigakure using its massive size and weight. In an instant, Kirigakure suffered widespread damage. Countless buildings were destroyed by the Three Tails rolling. The Three Tails, relying solely on its weight, moved as if unopposed. This seems pretty good too. Kazuki watched this scene, a smile appearing on his lips. Three Tails was not like Nine Tails, which had almost endless chakra. If the Nine Tails were to create tailed beast balls the caliber of the previous one, the consumption wouldn't even be able to keep up with its recovery speed. But for a tailed beast like the Three Tails, just using a few in a row might cause it to collapse. However, the Three Tails' current rolling damage was much more powerful than a tailed beast ball, which made Kazuki laugh and cry. Of course, the Three Tails rolling was not impossible to stop, but those Kirigakure ninjas who wanted to stop it were thwarted by Kazuki. For a time, Kirigakure was filled with wails of sorrow and suffered heavy losses. Of course, this was nothing to Madara. After all, Kirigakure was just a tool to him. Even if it were gone, there would be no problem. Instead, it would weaken the power of the ninja world. Looking at Kirigakure, which had turned into a living hell, Nawaki, who had been moving quickly, was stunned. Is Kazuki playing this big? He must have seen something that made him unhappy, right? Mikoto pondered for a moment, making an excuse for Kazuki. She didn't think Kazuki had done anything wrong, it was just that under normal circumstances, Kazuki wouldn't do such a thing. If Kazuki wanted to, the Land of Water battlefield would have been resolved by him long ago. Moreover, during their year in the Land of Water, they hadn't held back against Kirigakure ninjas, usually killing them on sight. But they hadn't indiscriminately attacked civilians, everyone had more or less maintained a bottom line, even if, according to Kazuki, the taxes these civilians paid supported Kirigakure, allowing those Kirigakure ninjas to attack them. As the person who understood Kazuki best, Mikoto could sense that Kazuki seemed very displeased. Perhaps it's related to the Uzumaki clan. Minato pondered for a moment, recalling the intelligence they had gathered earlier, and sighed helplessly. They had visited a research lab where all the Uzumaki clansmen were gone. Thinking of those tortured corpses, which even in death found no peace, it was understandable that Kazuki was angry. After all, Kazuki was good to his own people and cruel to his enemies. In his words, one should be as warm as spring to comrades, as fiery as summer to villagers, as swift as autumn leaves to missions, and as ruthless as harsh winter to enemies. Minato felt that Kazuki's words made a lot of sense. But now, Kazuki was clearly angry, otherwise, he wouldn't have launched an indiscriminate attack. However, tailed beasts really are a natural disaster. 40 advanced chapters on. Chapter 171, Switching Tactics. According to our investigation, a portion of the Uzumaki clansmen are imprisoned here. While Kazuki is distracting the Kirigakure ninjas, let's quickly get them out of here. Nawaki said. From a rational perspective, Nawaki knew that Kazuki's actions were not problematic. In Kazuki's words, it was a matter of, a dead comrade is better than a dead me. Although this would cause immense destruction to Kirigakure, it would also minimize Konoha's losses to the greatest extent. Even though Nawaki felt that this was somewhat improper, it was all for Konoha. Even he couldn't say anything against it. As for Mikoto, Minato, and Rinka, they were even less likely to speak up. Kazuki's actions were not problematic. Strategically, it was the best choice. However, very quickly, even Nawaki was seething with rage, completely unable to remain calm. How could they do this? Why would they treat the Uzumaki like this? He finally understood why Kazuki was so furious. Have they started moving? Kazuki stood on the Three Tails head, constantly sensing the surrounding auras. In particular, the actions of Nawaki, Minato, Mikoto, and Rinka had always been watched by him. The four of them were already quite strong, but he couldn't truly ignore them. If it came down to it, he was ready to act at any moment and destroy Kirigakure. However, judging by Madara's demeanor, he didn't seem to have any intention of stopping him. So what were they doing now? Kazuki spread his sensory ability across half of the ninja world. If the target were just an ordinary ninja, Kazuki wouldn't be able to expand the range so much. If the tailed beast chakra was sealed, he would have some trouble sensing it. But if it was released, then he could sense it immediately. He sensed for a moment, and quickly, his expression changed dramatically. Good grief, while he was controlling the Three Tails to destroy Kirigakure, the Six Tails had already run off to the Land of Fire. Madara was planning something big. Once the Six Tails causes massive destruction in the Land of Fire, then who will be the best choice to stop the Six Tails? Besides Kazuki, it would be Mito. If Mito truly needed to act, then she would probably perish. Thinking of this possibility, Kazuki's eyes were filled with chilling cold light. He needed to speed up his pace. He controlled the Three Tails to continue causing massive destruction within Kirigakure. While Kazuki was controlling the Three Tails to destroy Kirigakure, a huge change occurred in the war between Konoha and Kirigakure. Hamura never expected the third Mizukage to suddenly come to the Land of Fire, it was completely unforeseen by him. Moreover, Kirigakure had launched a large-scale attack on Konoha's defenses. As soon as this attack began, they directly released the Six Tails, which instantly made Hamura tremble with fear. He knew his own strengths and weaknesses. Although he was the commander of the Land of Water battlefield and a student of the second Hokage, Tobirama, his strength was not particularly outstanding. Among ordinary ninjas, he was a standout, but he could not become a top-tier expert. Whether it was the third Mizukage or the Six Tails, Hamura couldn't defeat either of them. He felt that his small frame simply couldn't contend with these two guys. To deal with these guys, Hamura actually thought of Kazuki. If it were Kazuki, perhaps he could suppress the third Mizukage and the Six Tails. However, he remembered that Kazuki was in the Land of Water and had never followed his orders. As the commander of the Land of Water battlefield, he didn't even have the authority to command Kazuki. It wasn't that he hadn't expressed dissatisfaction with Kazuki, and he had even contacted the village. But Kazuki completely ignored him, stating that he was an Umbu, a direct unit belonging only to the Hokage. What right does an elder have to command Konoha? What? Are you trying to rebel? Kazuki's words infuriated Hamura, and when he reported it to Hiruzen appeased him, but regarding Kazuki's command authority, Hiruzen said nothing. He couldn't understand whether Hamura was foolish or feigning foolishness. Why should Kazuki obey your command? If Kazuki hadn't become famous, then your command would be fine. But now, Kazuki has already become Konoha's strongest expert. Since when did you all lose all respect for the strong? Do you really want to force Kazuki to become another Madara? The current ninja world doesn't have Hashirama to stop Kazuki. Someone like Kazuki, you should be coaxing him, yet you still want to command him. Moreover, Kazuki made a very valid point. At least Kazuki was an Umbu. Did Hamura want to casually command and interfere? Wasn't he overstepping his bounds a bit? Normally, Hiruzen could turn a blind eye to these matters, as his Hokage authority still needed the support and maintenance of these old friends. But now it was wartime, and facing Kazuki, Hiruzen knew that his power was already established, and even he was powerless to stop it. The choice that best suited his interests was to do a favor. He chose to support Kazuki. If Kazuki's strength were like Kagami's, he could do other things, and Kazuki wouldn't be the first choice for Hokage. But Kazuki's strength had already reached the level of the former Hashirama and Madara, so Hiruzen had no choice but to compromise. This was based on Hanzo's combat power and Mito's evaluation. Hiruzen also chose to believe this possibility. It's good that Kazuki's strength is great. If Konoha could go back more than 20 years, it would seem quite good. When Hamura saw the third Mizukage and the Six Tails, his first action was to have Fugaku lead the Uchiha clan to confront the Six Tails. Your Uchiha clan claims that the Sharingan can control tailed beasts, right? Then the Six Tails is yours to handle. As for himself, he called upon the experts on the battlefield and confronted the third Mizukage. Chapter 172, Burning Kirigakure. Hamura was a politician, and even a bit of a coward, but he knew that this time he had to step up and face the third Mizukage. If he didn't go up this time, it was hard to guarantee that no one would settle accounts with him for this matter later. At that time, not to mention his Hokage advisor position, even his clan might be affected by his actions. To put it bluntly, if he died on the front line, then even if Konoha's side collapsed in this war, it would be a case of debts dying with the person. But if he did nothing, he would have to bear all the responsibility. Did he really think that being a commander meant he didn't have to bear any responsibility? In an instant, Hamura made the choice that was most suitable for him. Meanwhile, Fugaku was distraught after hearing Hamura's order. Not just Fugaku, but even the Uchiha who had come with Fugaku were in an uproar. Young clan head, what should we do? That's a tailed beast. They looked at the Six Tails in the distance, which was like a small mountain. For some reason, this tailed beast had run to the land of fire. And, it seemed that although it was attacking indiscriminately, its main targets were Konoha ninjas. This is a request from above, can we refuse? Fugaku gritted his teeth. Of course, he wanted to refuse, but what could he do? He knew that many people might die facing the Six Tails this time, but what could he do? If he refused, he would lose the qualification to compete with Kazuki, and all his efforts over the past year would be in vain. Moreover, even the Uchiha clan and his own father would be humiliated because of this, which was something he could not accept. Therefore, even if he clearly knew he couldn't win, he had to go. Fugaku's words made everyone else fall silent. Indeed, at this time, they could not be deserters. The Uchiha clan could not accept a traitor from their own clan. Has the Six Tails appeared? Kazuki sensed its aura the moment the Six Tails appeared, his eyes flickering slightly. It seemed Madara wanted to switch places. After a brief thought, a cold expression appeared on Kazuki's face. Since Madara wanted to cause trouble, he would make things even bigger. He looked at the Three Tails, which had already consumed a lot of chakra. He had no intention of returning the Three Tails. However, since he had come to Kirigakure, he had to create some trouble for Madara, such as killing the Three Tails. The revival of a tailed beast takes a lot of time, which would save Madara from reviving the 10 Tails, and this could create time for Kazuki to grow. Amaterasu. This was the first time Kazuki had used Amaterasu. Kazuki was now using Amaterasu to burn the Three Tails. Of course, he mainly placed the Amaterasu flames on the Three Tails' back and tail. The burning of Amaterasu made the Three Tails feel intense pain. However, Kazuki's ocular power was not something the Three Tails could break free from. Even with the Amaterasu flames burning on its body, Kazuki still controlled the Three Tails to continue rolling. Soon, more than half of Kirigakure was engulfed in Amaterasu flames. He wanted to use Amaterasu to kill the Three Tails, and he also hoped that the Three Tails and the Amaterasu flames could cause more damage to Kirigakure. After doing all this, his figure flashed and disappeared in front of Kirigakure. He arrived beside Mikoto through the Flying Thunder God mark, looking at the dozen or so Uzumaki clan members they had rescued. There were men and women, but none of them were particularly old. It's just that these people's conditions were not particularly good, but they were not in life-threatening danger. After returning to Konoha, they would probably need a long time to recover, and they might not even have the possibility of becoming ninja in this life. But as long as they were alive, it was good. If they could have descendants in the future, they could bring a lot of Uzumaki bloodline to Konoha, allowing the Uzumaki clan to be passed down in Konoha. They need to receive treatment as soon as possible. Mikoto said to Kazuki when she saw him. Okay. I'll send them back to Konoha now, where they can receive the best care. The entire Kirigakure is already in chaos, and we can't stay in the land of water anymore. They can't deal with me, but they will definitely target you guys. Kazuki then looked at the Uzumaki clan members not far away and said, also, you will need to adjust yourselves afterward. They have experienced many battles over the past year, and they also need some rest. Okay. Hearing Kazuki's words, the others had no intention of refusing. They were indeed psychologically exhausted. Here, it was either training or killing, and they all ate seafood. This kind of life was quite good for a day or two, and 1 or 2 months were not unacceptable. But it had been over a year now. As for whether Kazuki could take everyone away using the Flying Thunder God technique. If it were before, Kazuki would naturally feel pressure. Flying Thunder God technique consumes a lot of chakra, and the more chakra the target being transferred has, the more the consumption. But now he is already an Otsutsuki, and his spatial abilities are becoming more and more excellent. Think of Kagaya's Amanamanaka and Sasuke's Amenotajikara, these are all excellent spatial abilities. Among the ocular techniques Kazuki has awakened so far, there are no spatial abilities, but his spatial abilities are much better than before. Coupled with his massive amount of chakra, taking these people away was not difficult at all, and he could even return to Konoha in one go. Let's go. Everything else can wait until we get back to Konoha. Kazuki then continued. The moment he returned to Konoha, Kazuki immediately went to the Hokage office to report, while the Uzumaki clan members were taken to the Konoha hospital by Mikoto and the others. As for meeting Mito, that was impossible. Not to mention Mito, even Kushina would not come to see them for now. After all, no one knew what their attitude was now, and they would need to be tested through various means afterward. Chapter 173, Hiruzen takes the blame. Kazuki, you're back. Did something happen? Hiruzen was stunned for a moment when he saw Kazuki arrive, feeling a surge of unease in his heart. Could it be that something major had happened in the land of water? Actually, it's like this. Kazuki scratched his head and recounted how he had released Three Tails and destroyed the Kirigakure. It was fortunate that Hiruzen was still young. Otherwise, Kazuki would have worried that his news might give Hiruzen a heart attack. What? You went to Kirigakure, released Three Tails, and caused widespread destruction there. Even though Hiruzen was prepared, he jumped up when he heard Kazuki's words. He couldn't remain calm. If Kazuki had truly accomplished this, then the Kirigakure battlefield was likely to end. Of course, it could also cause the Kirigakure ninjas to unite in hatred and wage war against Konoha, as the animosity stirred by Kazuki and Konoha was simply too great. Kazuki spread his hands and said, perhaps this might cause a lot of trouble, but you have to understand that even if we did nothing, those guys from Kirigakure would still attack Konoha like rabid dogs. Whether I attacked them or not, they would act this way. Hiruzen opened his mouth but ultimately said nothing, as Kazuki's words made a lot of sense. The sheer madness of Kirigakure had exceeded Hiruzen's imagination. Since the war had already escalated to this point, making Kirigakure hate Konoha even more seemed to be no problem, at least it had crippled Kirigakure's vitality. If they were truly pushed to the brink, then they would just destroy the entire Kirigakure. The current Hiruzen was not the future Hiruzen, he wasn't as indecisive. Since they were already in an unending conflict with Kirigakure, then they might as well continue it. On the contrary, resolving the Kirigakure battlefield as soon as possible was what Hiruzen wanted to see. He picked up his pipe and took 2 deep puffs before instructing Kazuki, remember, your mission to release Three Tails in Kirigakure was ordered by me through Umbu channels. It wasn't your own initiative, do you understand? I understand. Kazuki naturally understood Hiruzen's intention. To some Konoha villagers, such an act might seem too deranged, somewhat breaking unwritten rules and leaving almost no room for maneuver between Konoha and Kirigakure. If it were exposed, it would inevitably bring some criticism to Kazuki. But if this matter was an order given by Hiruzen, the situation would be different. Hiruzen would have to bear the responsibility, as Kazuki was merely completing a mission assigned by the Hokage. As for the credit, the benefits Hiruzen gained were negligible, as he was already the 3rd Hokage. However, for Kazuki, the person who completed the mission, the situation was different, he only gained credit. Oh, and this time when we went to Kirigakure, Six Tails and the Mizukage were not in the village. Otherwise, accomplishing this might have required some effort. Of course, Kazuki was merely being modest. Even if Six Tails and the Mizukage had been there, he could still have easily dealt with them. It was just that Hiruzen didn't know that. Hiruzen didn't doubt this, as the strength of a Kage wasn't just about individual power but also organizational ability. When a village's power is integrated by a Kage, the impact it can achieve is beyond what ordinary ninjas can imagine. Hiruzen believed in Kazuki's strength, but that was an entire village. Is that so? Hiruzen frowned. This was not good news. Neither Six Tails nor the third Mizukage were in the village. Where could he be? Had he gone to the battlefield? Also, we brought back some Uzumaki clan members from Kirigakure. Their condition isn't very good, so I sent them to Konoha Hospital. Kazuki continued to report. Uzumaki. A complex look flashed in Hiruzen's eyes. If Uchiha had still existed, Konoha probably wouldn't have had to expend so much effort. Uchiha would have been enough to solve many of Konoha's troubles. But now, Uchiha was gone, and Konoha had lost its wartime fortress. Now that Uchiha was gone, taking in some Uzumaki seemed to be no problem in Hiruzen's eyes. It wasn't as if the entire Uzumaki clan had come over, and besides, it was uncertain whether these Uzumaki clan members could even become ninja. After a moment of thought, Hiruzen instructed Kazuki, "I'll leave them to you, but you need to determine their attitude towards Konoha." Kazuki had caused a major incident, and he needed to figure out how to maximize the benefits of this. If handled well, it might even be possible to end the Land of Water battlefield. Yes, I understand. They won't be able to resist my genjutsu. Kazuki immediately guaranteed. If those Uzumaki clan members harbored resentment towards Konoha, Kazuki wouldn't treat them well. After all, in Kazuki's view, Konoha had already shown extreme benevolence to Uchiha. His father, as a strong figure of Konoha, sacrificed himself on a mission to save Uchiha, and then he himself rescued them. If they were still ungrateful, that would be unappreciative. You should go tell Mito-sama about this first. Her health hasn't been very good recently. Towards the end, Hiruzen showed a pained expression. Hiruzen had always held Mito in great respect. If he could, he even wished he could exchange some of his lifespan for Mito's. Mito was Konoha's pillar of stability. Even Hiruzen had to admit that Mito seemed far more important than him. A year or two ago, Mito's health had begun to decline, and her chakra had started to decrease, and this situation was becoming increasingly severe. According to Mito, she might not last another year. Now, with Kazuki bringing back some Uzumaki, and Nawaki also returning, this was undoubtedly great news for Mito. He didn't plan to let Nawaki leave Konoha for now. Konoha didn't lack Nawaki's combat strength. Tsunade couldn't leave the battlefield, but Nawaki was different. Let him accompany Mito and live out the last period of her life well. New book. Renji transmigrates to the world of One Piece, at some random village. He spends his days on peace. But then, one day, pirates invade the place he calls home. On the verge of death, he awakens a system. And as if that wasn't enough, he gets Heavenly Six Eyes, basically Six Eyes Pro Max and Sukuna's Diamantle at the start. Besides, he gets bounty points for each kill of a pirate with which he can upgrade his skills. This leads to the rise of the strongest marine the world has ever seen. Ding! Host's performance upon joining the marine has been recognized by the system. Reward, Reverse Curse Technique, LV1. Chapter 174, Successful Wood Release Experiment. You should also take this opportunity to rest in the village for a few days. The village is currently fighting on 3 fronts, especially against Kirigakure. They are very likely to want to destroy Konoha along with themselves. You know, they have over 6,000 ninjas on the Land of Fire border. Hiruzen sighed and lamented at this point. If any unforeseen circumstances arise, I will need your help. Hiruzen was now full of confidence in Kazuki's strength. Perhaps if Kazuki goes alone, he will face the situation of being outnumbered, but he can provide some help to him, and then Kazuki can easily resolve the battlefield. Kazuki's expression was a bit subtle. There was no need to wait for any changes, the Kirigakure battlefield was already in an uproar, and he would have to go to the front line sooner or later. It was just that the intelligence from there hadn't arrived yet. However, none of this had anything to do with him. He wouldn't self-righteously believe that he had to save everyone. In his heart, only those who were willing to stand by him were his people. As for the others, or even those who opposed him, they were his enemies. It was already good enough that he didn't kill them. Neither Hamura nor Fugaku were Kazuki's allies. Just because Kazuki wasn't in Konoha doesn't mean he didn't know about their petty actions. It would be good enough if they died and he didn't set off firecrackers to celebrate. Hiruzen had already vouched for Kazuki. If someone were to make an issue of this later, saying that if he hadn't destroyed Karigakure wouldn't have fought Konoha to the death like that, then Kazuki could only say that his blade might not be dull. He was carrying out a mission given by Hokage-sama, how could he be wrong? If carrying out assigned missions required taking the blame for subsequent issues, then who would carry out missions in the future? It can be said that this time, Hiruzen had been extremely benevolent to Kazuki. If it were Tsukumo, he might have been ruined by this matter. Of course, Tsukumo couldn't do such a thing. But for now, Kazuki wouldn't tell Hiruzen what was happening on the front line. Konoha needed a hero who could turn the tide, a hero who could save everything. Only when the situation was dire would his value be maximized. I'm ready to be deployed at any time, but if possible, I want to stay in the village for a while. I'm tired of eating seafood from the land of water. Oh, and I brought Minato and Nawaki back. Their strength has improved greatly, and they've had enough combat experience. They need a good period of recuperation. After thinking for a moment, Kazuki said. Hiruzen pondered for a moment and agreed. Minato and the others were strong, but it wasn't their turn to take the lead yet. They had been fighting on the front line for a year, and it was time for them to rest. They were Konoha's future, and Hiruzen wanted to protect them. At the same time, he had to give Kazuki this favor. By the way, has Konoha considered who will become the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki? Kazuki hesitated for a moment before asking this question. He was still very hesitant about whether to let Kushina become the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. On one hand, the Nine-Tails could indeed enhance Kushina's strength, but on the other hand, becoming the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki would attract the attention of the Otsutsuki. Kazuki was not at ease with Kushina becoming the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. To be honest, I haven't decided yet. Hiruzen hesitated for a moment before explaining, Kushina now has a sense of belonging to Konoha. In terms of talent and ability, and even her relationship with you, she is the most suitable to become the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. However, once she becomes the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, Kushina also cannot leave the village lightly or move as freely as other ninjas. Previously, Konoha was conducting wood-release transplantation experiments. In fact, over the years, this experiment has had some results, but the results have not met our expectations. The wood-release experiment has had results. This time, Kazuki became curious. This was something that hadn't appeared in the original plot. Yes, it's actually those white guys you caught before. Through our research, we found that there's a portion of first Hokage-sama's cells in them. Using them, combined with first Hokage-sama's cell cultivation, and then transplanting them into children with Senju bloodline, it did allow them to master wood release, but the effect is far inferior to first Hokage-sama. Hiruzen said with regret, I don't know if it can suppress the Nine Tails. Kazuki nodded slightly. Madara could cultivate Hashirama's cells and even cultivate special white Setsu. There's no reason he could do it, but so many people in Konoha couldn't, right? Kazuki didn't know how to choose who would become the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, wanting Kushina to master the Nine-Tails power, but also not wanting Kushina to encounter danger. It's better to let Hiruzen make the choice. Kazuki quickly left. Hiruzen picked up his pipe and squinted his eyes. He had put in a lot of effort to vouch for Kazuki. He was the Hokage of Konoha. Even if it was a credit, it was dispensable to him. Wasn't this what a Hokage should do? On the contrary, if there were huge sequelae later, that would be his fault as Hokage. If things went wrong, his position as Hokage might not be secure. Therefore, from Hiruzen's perspective, maintaining stability was what he should do most. However, it was Kazuki who had done such a thing. He was his grand student. If he didn't vouch for Kazuki, the people from his faction would be in disarray. Moreover, there was nothing wrong with what Kazuki had done. There were indeed sequelae, but if handled well, the land of waterfront line could be resolved. After thinking for a moment, Hiruzen sent Umbu personnel to call Koharu. This matter required her to solve it with him. Now, Danzo had gone to the Iwagakure battlefield, and Hamura had gone to the Land of Water battlefield, leaving only Koharu in the village. Kazuki, you're finally back. When Kushina saw Kazuki, she pounced into his arms, pressing her face against his chest repeatedly. She hadn't seen Kazuki for almost a year. Kushina, long time no see. Kazuki rubbed Kushina's head, then looked at Mito beside him, his thoughts complex. Chapter 175, Conversing with Kurama. Kazuki's sensory ability was far superior to that of ordinary people, so he naturally sensed that Mito was now in her twilight years. If she hadn't become the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, Mito could have probably lived for 10 more years. Didn't you see that during the Boruto era, Koharu and Hamura were both still alive, and they could even come out and boss people around? Mito had been on the battlefield back then, unlike Koharu and Hamura, who were supplied with good food and drink. Since the end of the First Great Ninja War, Koharu and Hamura had not been on the battlefield. It's not that they got stronger, it's already good enough if their strength didn't decline. As the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, Mito always had to consume a large amount of chakra to suppress the Nine Tails, which led to her body deteriorating. Otherwise, with the Uzumaki clan's longevity, Mito wouldn't have been in such a state. You're back. Mito seemed not to have sensed Kazuki's complex emotions, greeting him with a gentle expression. Yes, I'm back, Grandma Mito. Kazuki led Kushina to sit not far from Mito. Minato, Mikoto, and Rinka were not here. It was obvious they had all gone home. It was enough to come to Mito's place and say hello. After all, Nawaki and Kushina were Mito's relatives. As for Kazuki, he was half a relative, but the others were different. A certain sense of boundary needed to be maintained. Sit down. It seems you have grown again after some time. Mito silently sensed Kazuki's aura and was astonished to find that his temperament had undergone a huge change compared to before. This was very similar to Nawaki and the others, but Kazuki's strength had probably increased by more than one level compared to before. Seeing Kazuki become so powerful, Mito felt increasingly at ease. With Kazuki guarding Konoha, no matter what choice Kazuki would make in the future, Konoha would be safe. Yes, there has been significant progress. Kazuki looked at Mito with a complex expression and said, "You must have heard about the Uzumaki situation." Yes. Nawaki already told me earlier. Thank you for rescuing these children. If possible, I hope they can live peacefully in Konoha in the future. Mito said with great relief. As for now, I won't go see them yet. Let Kushina go see them on my behalf later. I'll have to trouble you later as well. If nothing unexpected happens, Kazuki will become the next Hokage. For the Uzumaki clan to develop steadily in Konoha, they cannot do without Kazuki's help. They didn't need too much special care. As long as Kazuki was willing to treat everyone equally, that would be enough. When their numbers increased in the future, the Uzumaki could gradually become ninjas. Mito then looked at Kushina. With Kushina present, protecting the Uzumaki clan was not a problem at all. Yes. I will take appropriate care of them. Kazuki nodded slightly. However, these Uzumaki clansmen need to be thoroughly vetted first. It's hard to guarantee they don't harbor hatred towards Konoha, and Kirigakure might have left some contingencies on them. Mito naturally understood what Kazuki meant. She could almost certainly conclude that Kirigakure was under Madara's control, which seemed to be no difficulty for Madara. Mito was not surprised by this and said, "Let everything proceed according to the rules." After all, Uchiha was only an ally of Konoha before. If we go too far, it's hard to guarantee that other ninjas in the village won't have thoughts. The village was still at war now, and they couldn't even take good care of their own ninjas. If too many resources were poured into the Uzumaki, it was hard to guarantee that the ninjas in the village wouldn't harbor resentment, which would be extremely detrimental to the Uzumaki clan in the future. Immediately after, Mito looked at Kushina and Nawaki, who were beside her, and said, "Kushina, Nawaki, you two go out first. I have something to tell Kazuki privately." Yes. Nawaki didn't think too much and invited Kushina. "Kushina, I'll take you to meet your clan members." "Okay, I understand." Kushina didn't refuse when she heard Nawaki was taking her to meet her fellow clan members. It was a pity that Kazuki wasn't personally taking her. However, since Mito had something to discuss with Kazuki, Kushina wouldn't cause trouble. After the two left, Mito finally spoke with emotion. In 1 year, Nawaki has grown a lot, not just in strength, but mainly in his mindset and maturity. As his grandmother, I am very pleased. Thank you for guiding Nawaki this past year. No need, Grandma, you've always taken good care of me too. Kazuki shook his head slightly. Then he said to Mito, "Grandma Mito, would it be convenient for me to meet the Nine Tails?" "You can." Mito nodded in agreement without any hesitation. As Kazuki's Sharingan flashed, his consciousness arrived in the place Nine Tails was sealed. Unlike before, though the Nine Tails was still bound, the binding force was much weaker than before. Kazuki. Nine Tails sensed Kazuki's arrival instantly. However, the moment he saw Kazuki, Nine Tails' eyes widened. He sensed the strong aura of Hagoromo on Kazuki. Indeed, Kazuki is Hagoromo's chakra reincarnation. "Hello, Nine Tails." Kazuki gazed at Nine Tails for a long time. His eyes underwent a huge change, transforming into the Rinnegan. Rinnegan. At this, Nine Tails completely lost composure. How old was Kazuki? He seemed to be less than 12, right? And he had already awakened the Rinnegan. Did the Sage of Six Paths awaken the Rinnegan at this age? When I awakened these eyes, I sensed that I could seemingly summon something, but it appears to have been summoned prematurely. Kazuki covered his eyes and said meaningfully, "I strongly suspect that someone awakened these eyes before me. Madara, it must be Madara." Nine Tails immediately lost composure. Chapter 176, Kurama wants to join. The person Nine Tails hated the most was Madara. It was free back then. As long as it didn't encounter Madara or Hashirama, it was invincible. As for other ninjas, even though the Uzumaki had some restraint over tailed beasts, ordinary Uzumaki clansmen couldn't control the adamantine ceiling chains. Even if they did, briefly suppressing common-tailed beasts was possible, but oppressing a top-tailed beast like Ninetales was almost like a fool's dream. Unless it was an outstanding Uzumaki like Mito, but even then, Ninetales was confident it could escape. But Madara and Hashirama were not ordinary people. Others might not know, but how could Ninetales not know? These two were the reincarnations of Indra Chakra and Asura Chakra, respectively. It seemed very normal for them to be able to restrain it. To be honest, even if Ninetales hadn't sensed the aura of these two chakra, just knowing their strength would be enough to realize that these two were reincarnated cheaters. Well, in Ninetales' mind, anyone who could defeat it was a cheater, and anyone who couldn't was a normal human. To beat Madara, even if Ninetales had to team up with Hashirama, it would spare no effort. Speaking of which, did Hashirama need its power to deal with Madara? It seemed that Madara, after awakening his Rinnegan, might have already surpassed Hashirama in strength. Madara, where is he? Ninetales lost its composure and immediately yelled. I don't know either. I went to Kirigakure and released Three Tails. At that time, I could clearly feel it was controlled by a very powerful ocular power, a power even stronger than a regular Mangekyo Sharingan. Only Madara could achieve that. Kazuki said with a slight shake of his head, implying something. It must be him. He is the reincarnation of Indra Chakra. Ninetales said through gritted teeth. Only he possesses such a pair of eyes. If one doesn't have Indra Chakra, is it impossible to activate the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan? Kazuki looked at the Ninetales with a hint of curiosity. In fact, the main reason he had exposed the Rinnegan to Ninetales this time was to observe Ninetales' condition and see if any contingency plans were left on it. And upon seeing Ninetales this time, Kazuki confirmed this conjecture. Just like the Three Tails, I sense the same ocular power on you. What? If the Ninetailed hadn't been bound, it would have sprung up at that moment. It still had Madara's ocular power on it. Didn't that mean that as long as Madara wished, it could be controlled by Madara at any time? How could Ninetales possibly accept such a thing? Could it be that Mito sealing it inside her was actually to protect it? No way. Mito, quickly use your invincible sealing jutsu to find a way to resolve the contract and ocular power on me. Based on my understanding of your situation, if you are inside a Jinchuriki, it's better. But if you leave the Jinchuriki's body, as long as Madara wishes, he can summon you away at any time. Moreover, the ocular power within you can be activated at any time. Not only can Madara control you, but if an Uchiha gets the backdoor access given by Madara, you can be controlled by the other party at any time. Kazuki then continued to add. He thought of the future Obito. Indeed, the Mangekyo Sharingan has a great restraining effect on tailed beasts, but it isn't to the extent that it can easily control Ninetales. Keep in mind, Obito didn't have two Mangekyo Sharingan, but only one. Then what should I do? Ninetales began to panic at this moment. Damn it, why is there such a disgusting clan as the Uchiha? This rotten clan will fall sooner or later. Arbitrarily controlling the power of the tailed beasts was simply too despicable. You will have another Jinchuriki later, so you can rest assured about that. Kazuki comforted Ninetales. But that's Madara. That's the Rinnegan. An ordinary person becoming my Jinchuriki wouldn't be Madara's match. Ninetales had confidence in itself, but it had no confidence in facing Madara. Its future Jinchuriki couldn't possibly be stronger than Mito, right? Thinking of this, Ninetales looked at Kazuki. It couldn't rely on ordinary Jinchuriki, but Kazuki was different. If Kazuki became its Jinchuriki, then it wouldn't be helping Kazuki, but Kazuki protecting it. As for whether it could enhance Kazuki's strength, Ninetales felt it had some use. Are you putting your idea on me? Kazuki looked at Ninetales with a subtle expression. I don't seem to need you inside me very much. I admit you are very strong, and if I were to become a perfect Jinchuriki, it could enhance my strength, but I want to deduce the power of the Kekkei Genkais through my own strength. Kazuki extended his hand, and a black rod appeared in his hand. This is the power of Yin-Yang release. Theoretically, my control over the 5 elements is very good, but researching the truth-seeking orb is extraordinarily difficult. Ninetales fell silent. It hadn't expected Kazuki to have reached such a level in his control of Yin-Yang release. But thinking about it carefully, Kazuki was Hagoromo's chakra reincarnation, and he had awakened the Rinnegan at 12 years old. What was the problem with him mastering Yin-Yang release? In Ninetales' view, this seemed perfectly reasonable. But it couldn't help Kazuki control the truth-seeking orb. This was the first time it began to doubt itself, so what was its use exactly? Ninetales, stay obediently inside Grandma Mito for a few more years. Kazuki said softly. You must understand, you are in a very dangerous situation right now. Madara is definitely plotting something big. Don't you want to get rid of him? Ninetales seemed to have thought of something and quickly added, wait, Madara might have already summoned the Geto statue. If you don't deal with him soon, he will bring a huge threat to the ninja world, possibly even destroying it. 10 Tails. Kazuki looked at Nine Tails with a knowing gaze. As expected, an old fox like Nine Tails needed some provoking. Chapter 177, Nine Tails, am not a burden. 10 Tails. Nine Tails bristled at those two words. Being sealed was something it found hard to accept. It could even accept being killed, as it was a tailed beast and could be resurrected. But if it were absorbed by 10 Tails, then it would truly die. How do you know that name? Nine Tails then looked at Kazuki with a mixture of surprise and uncertainty. Although the other party was very likely Hagoromo's chakra reincarnation, he was not the Sage of Six Paths after all. What if he had a crazy idea and wanted to revive the 10 Tails? He simply didn't know how dangerous 10 Tails truly was. Some things have never been secrets. Kazuki looked at Nine Tails meaningfully. But some things make others very curious. According to my investigation, 10 Tails doesn't seem to be a good thing. Ah, yes, 10 Tails is indeed not a good thing. Nine Tails nodded repeatedly. 10 Tails is not a good thing, so you must not set your mind on 10 Tails. I don't want to be absorbed by 10 Tails. Right. Kazuki let out a light chuckle. But that thing Madara summoned, it should be related to 10 Tails, right? Do you really have no idea at all? Nine Tails looked at Kazuki with a serious expression and said, 10 Tails is a terrifying existence. The 9-tailed beasts originated from 10 Tails, they were separated from 10 Tails by the Sage of Six Paths. Although 10 Tails can bring a significant increase in power, according to the Sage of Six Paths, it seems to be a very dangerous existence. Even the Sage of Six Paths was extremely wary of 10 Tails, as if 10 Tails was connected to a very terrifying entity behind it. It was precisely because of this apprehension that the Sage of Six Paths divided 10 Tails' power. We absolutely cannot let the bastard Madara revive 10 Tails, otherwise the entire ninja world might be doomed. Is that so? Kazuki nodded thoughtfully. Madara in his normal state was already extremely powerful, and Madara in his 10 Tails Jinchuriki state was incredibly formidable. Without a powered-up Naruto and Sasuke, it would probably be very difficult to stop him. Of course, Madara's strength was not as great as Kagaya's. Kazuki wondered about the strength of the other Otsutsuki. He then thought of Ishiki, who was the existence he currently feared the most. If Ishiki sets his sights on his body, then... it seems he doesn't need to worry at all. While Ishiki is strong, if Ishiki truly covets his body, then Ishiki himself will be the one to suffer in the end. Kazuki's Rinnegan technique, Enmasatsu, is specifically aimed at souls. Kazuki was very much looking forward to Ishiki setting his sights on him and then implanting a karma on him. He was very curious whether after destroying Ishiki's soul, that karma would become a white karma. I understand. I hope you can cooperate well later. Kazuki stared at Nine Tails and warned. Even if I restrain my power, Mito won't live much longer. This is something I cannot control. If you truly want her to live longer, the best way is to extract me. I can leave a portion of my chakra within Mito's body, so she won't need to expend excessive chakra to suppress me. Nine Tails chose to be a wise man who knew when to adapt, and besides, was compromising with Kazuki a problem. Anyway, from Nine Tails' perspective, this wasn't a problem, it was just giving respect to the Sage of Six Paths chakra reincarnation. It definitely wasn't because it was afraid of 10 Tails targeting it. That Kushina outside, I think she's very good. How about letting her become my Jinchuriki? Immediately after, Nine Tails spoke again with a shocking statement. Nine Tails used to not be able to see the outside world, but as Mito's strength weakened, it could see things outside. Moreover, Mito was arranging for Kushina to come into contact with her. Nine Tails knew that Kushina and Kazuki had a very good relationship. If Kushina became its Jinchuriki, then Kazuki wouldn't be willing to let his woman die, right? After a Jinchuriki has a tailed beast extracted, as long as a portion of the chakra is retained, there will be no life-threatening danger. Kazuki asked somewhat uncertainly. Such a thing seemed to have happened more than once with B. Thinking about it, 8 Tails had a somewhat tragic future. It was extracted from B more than once. This requires the tailed beast's cooperation. If we are intentionally extracted and we, the tailed beasts, do not cooperate, these chakra will not be restrained, and the Jinchuriki will still die after the tailed beast is extracted. Nine Tails said. As for whether Kazuki believed it, that was another matter. Kazuki had no intention of reviving 10 Tails. At least he himself didn't need 10 Tails' power. The real-world 10 Tails had significant hidden dangers, so why not set his eyes on the 10 Tails in the combat arena? Is that so? Whether to let Kushina become a Jinchuriki, I still need to consider it. Kazuki thought for a moment and then said, after all, you will bring her danger. Nine Tails thought, I am Nine Tails, the strongest tailed beast, how could I bring danger to Kushina? But thinking about it carefully, even if it cooperates with Kushina, they will still not be Madara's match. No, it must make Kazuki protect it well. Chapter 178, Let Kushina be the Jinchuriki. How about you become my Jinchuriki? I cooperated with Asura back then. Asura was already pretty strong at that time, but I still provided him with considerable help. As long as we cooperate properly, you might even reach the level of the Sage of Six Paths back then. Ninetails quickly coaxed him. As long as Kazuki became its Jinchuriki, it would make him collect the chakra of the other tailed beasts. It's better to sacrifice a friend than oneself. As long as Kazuki gathers the power of the nine-tailed beasts, confronting Madara should be effortless. It, Ninetails, was not a burden. Your strength is quite good, but I myself have other methods to enhance my power. Kazuki shook his head slightly. This isn't a question of danger, it's just that your boost to me isn't significant. Using your power to study Tentail's power is fine, but I don't like having any sentient beings inside my body. That applies to you, and it applies to Tentails as well. Is that so? Kurama breathed a sigh of relief. If that was the reason, Kurama, could accept it. This way, it wouldn't have to worry about Kazuki wanting to synthesize Tentails and then feeding it to it. As for Kushina, I haven't decided whether to let her become a Jinchuriki. I just hope that if she does become the Jinchuriki, you can cooperate well with her. Kazuki then instructed Kurama. If it's Kushina, I have no objections. But you need to resolve Madara's problem quickly, and you also need to help me with that bastard Madara's contract and ocular power. Kurama quickly promised Kazuki. It still needed Kazuki's protection, so what if it had to cooperate well with Kushina? It had to give some respect to the Rinnegan, and besides, it had a good impression of Kazuki. I temporarily cannot help you resolve the contract between you and Madara. As for Madara's ocular power within your body, I can indeed break it, but I don't plan to do so for now. If I break it, Madara will know that you are no longer under his control. You are absolutely safe inside Grandma Mito's body. Kazuki looked at Kurama, hinting at something. Kurama fell silent. Even Kazuki couldn't resolve the contract. Damn Madara. To think that even Kazuki, who has awakened the Rinnegan, cannot resolve it. What kind of trump card did Madara leave on it? If this matter isn't resolved soon, it might not have much to look forward to in this life. However, just as Kazuki said, it could ensure its safety within Mito's body, and it indeed couldn't let Madara know much about Kazuki. Kazuki is only 12 years old now, he must be given time to grow. Even old man Hagoromo needs time to grow. Ah, yes, we definitely can't let Madara know. Kurama quickly agreed with Kazuki's words. That guy will do anything. You need to be careful of Madara outside. Then, goodbye. Ninetails. Kazuki's figure quickly disappeared. What Ninetails? I have a name too. My name is Kurama. Kurama muttered, but his heart remained restless for a long time. Madara had awakened the Rinnegan and even summoned the Geto statue. Given Madara's ambition, he is very likely to revive Tentails. He is simply too dangerous. Kurama. Mito had been paying attention to the conversation between Kazuki and Kurama. It wasn't that she didn't trust Kazuki, but rather that she passively heard the information. Mito had long known about the contract on Kurama, but she hadn't noticed that Kurama also had Madara's ocular power on him. After all, she wasn't telepathically connected with Kurama. She was merely forcefully using Kurama's power and hadn't noticed that ocular power. However, something else particularly concerned Mito. Kazuki had already awakened the Rinnegan. Did this mean he had become the second Sage of Six Paths? No, Madara might have also awakened the Rinnegan, which means Kazuki is the third. And the so-called Tentails greatly concerned Mito. She knew how strong Kurama was, but Tentails was the progenitor of the nine-tailed beasts, so she couldn't help but be concerned. This level of power was not something an ordinary person could contend with. Mito then recalled the legends she heard when she was young in the Uzumaki clan, how the Sage of Six Paths was revered by countless people precisely because he sealed an ancient demonic beast. If there were no surprises, that being was probably Tentails. That was a powerful being that even the Sage of Six Paths found troublesome. This time, knowing Kurama's name was good news. And as for Kushina, Kurama was actually willing to cooperate with her. If Kushina could perfectly use Kurama's power, her future strength might even surpass her own. After all, she only forcefully used Kurama's power, while Kushina could perfectly cooperate with Kurama, which could further enhance Kushina's strength. With Kazuki's presence, Mito was no longer worried that Kurama would cause any trouble. The only concern was Madara, but Madara was quite old now. Even if he found a successor in the future, they probably wouldn't be able to harm Kushina under Kazuki's protection. Looking at it this way, it seems Kushina is more suitable to become the Ninetails Jinchuriki. Kurama won't cause any more trouble, Grandma Mito, you can rest assured. After coming out, Kazuki said to Mito. He hadn't intended to hide his conversation with Kurama from Mito, as it was Mito's mental space, and it would be difficult to hide anything from her. I do feel much more relaxed. Mito showed a look of relief. Child, you don't need to be sad. The reason I am still alive is simply to protect Konoha, keep Kurama in check, and see the next generation of the village. Now that you all have grown up, I believe you can protect Konoha. Now, there isn't much motivation to live anymore. For old folks like us who came from the Sengoku era, being able to live until now is actually quite rare and valuable. Compared to others, I am already very happy. I understand. Kazuki nodded slightly. However, as your junior, I still hope you can live a little longer. After all, we all treat you like our own grandmother. I know. Mito looked at Kazuki with eyes full of relief. At least Kazuki was a child who valued relationships and was definitely not a heartless person. Chapter 179, Mastermind, Sage of Six Paths. Mito knew that the Uchiha clan was a clan that valued emotions deeply. Kazuki was a very filial child, and he also considered Kushina, Mikoto, Rinka, and Iwaki as good friends. As long as he had such friends, there was no need to worry about Kazuki going astray. If Izuna had not died back then, perhaps Madara would not have taken that path. Of course, if Izuna were alive, Madara probably wouldn't have shaken hands and allied with Hashirama. Even though Madara's strength surpassed Izuna's, the one who always handled the Uchiha clan's affairs was Izuna, the deputy chief. Izuna was an old-school Uchiha, very similar to Tobirama in that regard. If Izuna were still around, the situation would have been different. Mito did not want Kazuki to follow a path similar to Madara's, where in the end, he would have no one left to support him. This child is very good, truly very good. He deserves a better future. What will you do about the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki? Mito then asked Kazuki. Nine-Tails Jinchuriki? Actually, I'm quite hesitant. If Kushina becomes the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki and gains Nine-Tails recognition, her strength will greatly improve. Moreover, as far as I know, Nine-Tails also possesses Sage Mode. Kazuki said with a slight hesitation, once Nine-Tails genuinely cooperates, if I train Kushina, her strength won't be much worse than Madara's and the first Hokage's during the Valley of the End period. Of course, it's very likely she won't be able to defeat them. After all, they fought their way through the Sengoku era, and their combat experience is not comparable to that of ordinary ninjas. Madara's strength during the Valley of the End period was immense, but not entirely insurmountable. Didn't the future Naruto also fight by relying on Nine-Tails? Naruto in Sage Mode was very powerful. Don't forget, even at the end of Shippuden, the Nine-Tails used by Naruto was only half of Nine-Tails' power. First it was the Yang Nine-Tails, then the Ine Nine-Tails. And if Kushina becomes the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki later, she will have the complete Nine-Tails inside her. Without a Jinchuriki, Nine-Tails would naturally fear Madara, but when cooperating with a Jinchuriki, it might not fear Madara from the Valley of the End period. In the future, when fighting those Otsutsuki, wasn't it also in Nine-Tails Chakra mode? Nine-Tails also has Sage Mode. Mito was startled upon hearing this. She hadn't expected Nine-Tails to have such an ability. If that's the case, then Hashirama's victory at the Valley of the End was rather fortunate. It was also fortunate that Madara didn't gain Nine-Tails recognition. If Nine-Tails had willingly cooperated with Madara and then entered Sage Mode, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Don't forget, Madara eventually revived, while Hashirama died from chakra exhaustion. If Madara had borrowed the power of Sage Mode, it's hard to imagine the outcome. Yes, and it's the purest form of Sage Mode. The nine-tailed beasts were with the Sage of Six Paths back then, so they naturally learned a lot of things. Towards the end of his sentence, Kazuki became uncertain. It seemed that Sage Mode might very well be an innate talent of Nine-Tails. At least, he hadn't seen any other tailed beasts master Sage Mode. Perhaps this was because Nine-Tails was actually the closest to the Ten-Tails. Is that so? Mito nodded thoughtfully. Sage of Six Paths. She wondered what kind of person he was. However, being a Nine-Tails Jinchuriki is still dangerous. I suspect Madara is just a visible target. Some things are too coincidental. Madara and Hashirama cared so much about each other. To put it bluntly, if Madara were a woman, Grandma Mito, there probably wouldn't have been any room for you, would there? Kazuki said, his words shocking to the extreme. Mito was stunned for a moment, then burst into laughter. She had to admit, although Kazuki's idea was a bit rebellious, if she thought carefully about the relationship between Madara and Hashirama, if Madara really were a woman, there might truly have been no place for her. Perhaps it's truly so. Mito sighed softly, acknowledging Kazuki's thought. I've observed and investigated previously. It seems that during the 1,000-year-long war between the Senju and the Uchiha clan, it wasn't just Hashirama and Madara who wanted to reconcile, but they always failed. It seems there was an unseen, powerful hand hindering the two clans from reconciling. Moreover, as far as I know, before Madara controlled Nine Tails, the first Hokage hadn't learned Sage Mode yet, had he? Following this, Kazuki asked again. That's right. Mito frowned, recalling the past. Although the Shikatsu Forest contract has always been a tradition of the Senju clan, for a long time before that, Hashirama hadn't learned Sage Mode. At that time, he felt a crisis, so he specifically went to learn Sage Mode. But he didn't expect such a thing to happen. It was fortunate that he learned Sage Mode. Kazuki nodded understandingly. Initially, he thought that Hashirama had learned Sage Mode before Madara awakened the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. But thinking about it carefully, if Hashirama had learned Sage Mode by then, Madara would probably have doubted his entire existence. If he dared to approach Hashirama with Nine Tails, then it was highly likely that Hashirama had not used Sage Mode in front of Madara before. Now that I recall carefully, it seems Madara and Hashirama's strengths were always quite similar. Mito's eyes were filled with nostalgia. I heard Nine Tails say before that they were the reincarnations of Indra Chakra and Asura Chakra. If that's the case, it doesn't seem incomprehensible. But listening to you, it seems that every time Madara's strength increased, Hashirama's strength would also increase accordingly, always subtly stronger than Madara's. Kazuki smiled and said, so, don't you think there's an unseen, powerful hand secretly manipulating things in the ninja world? Asura and Indra, Madara, and Hashirama, aren't they very similar? Mito's pupils suddenly constricted. How did Asura and Indra fall out? Weren't those two brothers? In the end, the two brothers fought to the death, and even their respective descendants fought endlessly. Perhaps behind the ninja world, there truly was an unseen, powerful hand in control. Mito looked at Kazuki. Could it be the Sage of Six Paths? 40 advanced chapters on. Chapter 180, Hagoromo's Purpose. Mito hadn't forgotten that Indra and Asura were the sons of the Sage of Six Paths, so who could possibly scheme against the sons of the Sage? Mito thought of the legendary Sage of Six Paths. But what was the purpose of him doing this, even going so far as to scheme against his own descendants? Mito felt that the Sage of Six Paths seemed to have laid out many things. The continuous reincarnation of Indra and Asura Chakra, the division of 10 tails into 9-tailed beasts, and even the orchestration of the Senju clan and Uchiha clan's millennium-long feud, and even the wars of the entire Sengoku era. If that were truly the case, then what exactly was the Sage of Six Paths scheming? As Mito thought of this, she looked at Kazuki with renewed surprise and uncertainty. Don't misunderstand, it wasn't that Mito suspected Kazuki, but rather that she was worried about him. She could now almost certainly conclude that Kazuki was, in all likelihood, the reincarnation of the Sage of Six Paths Chakra. Otherwise, Kazuki couldn't possibly be so powerful, having even awakened the Sage of Six Paths Sage Eyes. Mito had some worries in her heart. What if all of this was the Sage of Six Paths scheme? For example, the Sage of Six Paths could take over Kazuki's body and make a comeback. All of this was something Mito had to face with caution. Initially, she was unwilling to speculate about the Sage of Six Paths in such a way, after all, he was her ancestor. But as she learned more, coupled with Kazuki's words, she increasingly felt that there was an unseen hand pushing things in the ninja world. What exactly was the Sage of Six Paths scheming? However, very quickly, she sighed helplessly. If it were a strong person like Madara, she actually had a way to deal with him. She hadn't not prepared a trump card for Madara, and in fact, she had always been waiting for Madara to come knocking, so that she could drag Madara to his death with her, letting this hidden danger of the ninja world die together with her, or even completely resolve Madara. What Hashirama failed to achieve back then, she would complete. But if Madara didn't actively come knocking, she couldn't do anything. And as for her confronting the Sage of Six Paths, even Mito didn't have much confidence. Could she really contend with the Sage of Six Paths? She wanted to help Kazuki, but she didn't have many ways. Kazuki didn't know that his action of merely wanting to mention the existence of a mastermind, especially the issue of Black Zetsu, to Mito had caused her to suspect the Sage of Six Paths. However, upon careful thought, the Sage of Six Paths indeed didn't seem entirely innocent. He hadn't handled the relationship between his two sons well. Moreover, the reincarnation of Asura Chakra could occasionally get a power-up, coincidentally suppressing the reincarnation of Indra Chakra. If there wasn't the Sage of Six Paths showing favoritism and cheating during this period, Kazuki would never believe it. Clearly, Hagoromo was scheming something. The planet's energy is limited. If energy is absorbed through 10 tails, no matter how special the ninja world's planet is, there will eventually be a day when it runs dry. But Hagoromo passed on the chakra seeds to the world, allowing ordinary people the possibility of fiddling with chakra, and those souls then went to the Pure Land. If Hagoromo's goal was those souls possessing chakra, then he probably regarded the entire ninja world as a ranch. The more fiercely the ninja world fought, the happier Hagoromo would probably be, as it would help him more. Of course, Kazuki didn't yet know his true objective and could only guard against him. However, with Enmasatsu, he wasn't afraid of Hagoromo, who had no physical body. If Hagoromo's intentions were good, if he hoped to temper the strength of ninjas through war to combat the Otsutsuki, then it would be a bit unfair to resent Hagoromo. After all, a peaceful environment genuinely makes it difficult for strong people to emerge. Constantly disturbing the ninja world through the reincarnations of Asura and Indra Chakra, thereby tempering the entire ninja world, it doesn't seem impossible. Just as Kazuki was about to say something, an Umbu rushed over and said, "Kazuki, Hokage-sama is calling you to the Hokage building for a meeting." "I understand, I'll be right there." Kazuki sighed faintly. It seemed Hiruzen already knew what had happened on the Land of Water battlefield. After this, he might have to make a trip to the Land of Water battlefield. He wondered if Hamura and Fugaku had survived. He was somewhat looking forward to it. Some guys who only know how to whine and complain, it's time to sweep them into the trash can. "Grandma Mito, Hokage-sama is calling me, so I'll take my leave first." Kazuki looked at Mito, who seemed to want to say something but hesitated, and after a long while, he continued, "Please take good care of yourself. Go. Konoha's matters are important. If Hiruzen calls you over, something important must have happened." Mito waved her hand. She was a bit curious about what had happened. Before coming to see her, Kazuki had met Hiruzen, so why would he ask for Kazuki again? Logically speaking, he should at least give Kazuki a few days to rest. Hiruzen, how could this happen? Koharu's eyes held a hint of shock. The intelligence just transmitted by the ninja hawk was simply too alarming. Could this be Kirigakuru's retaliation against us? It's not retaliation. Kazuki already warned me earlier that the 3rd Mizukage and Six-Tails were not in the village, they were on the battlefield at the front. We should be glad Kazuki destroyed Kirigakure, otherwise the situation would be even worse. Even if Kirigakure wants to attack us now, they will be powerless. Hiruzen said decisively. Moreover, this matter can only be unrelated to Kazuki. He seized the opportunity to destroy Kirigakure as much as possible. It seems you've already made your decision. Koharu looked at Hiruzen meaningfully, but she didn't voice any words of denial. Still, the same old saying. If it were any other Uchiha, Koharu would absolutely object, but Kazuki was, after all, Kagami's son, and Tsunade's student, and he was acknowledged by Mito. No one was more legitimate than Kazuki. Chapter 181, Paving the Way for Kazuki. Hiruzen took a puff from his pipe and said, "Kazuki is the only choice now. If it were Tsunade, she might have a chance to compete with him, and Kazuki would give Tsunade that much face. But Orochimaru doesn't have that capability. Moreover, Orochimaru himself isn't willing to compete with him. Kazuki's strength is too great, it's very likely he's not much weaker than Madara was back then. Who can stop him?" At this, Koharu fell silent. Fortunately, she had switched allegiances early, they were considered loyal retainers. Thinking about the Uchiha now, she realized that not many people acknowledged Kazuki. On the contrary, they were supporting Kazuki. Putting themselves in his shoes, Kazuki would surely need these supporters eventually, right? It was just pitiful for Hamura and Danzo, they didn't support Kazuki, and even resisted him. No, given the current situation, Hamura would be severely impacted this time, even if he didn't die. "What do you plan to do about the Land of Water battlefield?" Koharu then asked Hiruzen. "If Kirigakure is allowed to wreak havoc within the Land of Fire, the daimyo won't be pleased. And you will also be greatly affected. Someone has to take the blame for this. If the person who destroyed Kirigakure wasn't Kazuki, and Kazuki's strength wasn't this formidable, Koharu wouldn't mind shifting the blame to the other party. In short, the Hokage could not have a dark side, all blame had to be unrelated to the Hokage. Just like how during these past years, Danzo had always handled some dirty work for Hiruzen, and they were all well aware of these matters. To put it bluntly, the fact that Naruto's identity couldn't be exposed in the original story might have been to maintain the Hokage's upright image. It was well known that 4th Hokage Minato had turned the tide during the Third Great Ninja War and sealed the Ninetales during the Ninetales incident, making him a hero who saved Konoha. But if people knew that Naruto was Minato's son, and that the Ninetales seal broke not only because someone interfered but also because Kushina was giving birth, what would some people think? Never underestimate human nature, and never overestimate human nature. Many people would think, why did you, a Ninetales Jinchuriki, insist on having a child? You clearly knew that during childbirth, Ninetales seal would weaken, so why did you still do it? As Hokage, Minato, couldn't you even think of this? Or did you disregard Konoha's safety for the sake of your own child? Minato's death had an element of dying for love, and it was also necessary for him to die at that time, otherwise he wouldn't be able to bear the blame for the Ninetales incident. His previous contributions were immense, and he also rendered great service in sealing Ninetales, but he also needed to bear the responsibility for the Ninetales incident. Ultimately, the Hokage needed to be responsible for many things. Doing some things well and gaining credit was useless, and if mistakes were made, responsibility had to be borne. However, most mistakes didn't need to be shouldered by the Hokage alone. If Minato hadn't died, the entire Hokage faction would have faced problems. And this time, the blame on Kazuki's side couldn't be shifted. Moreover, Kazuki's contribution to Konoha had to be acknowledged. If he hadn't destroyed Kirigakure would have dispatched a large army to invade at this time, and the situation would certainly be worse. Therefore, he was not only not a criminal but a meritorious figure instead. We will expose the truth of the matter. We demand factual reporting. We cannot let a meritorious figure be condemned. As for the Kirigakure battlefield afterward, let Kazuki go. He will become the commander on the Kirigakure side. After a moment of hesitation, Hiruzen spoke, I will dispatch 1,000 ninjas from the Sarutobi clan as reinforcements. With the less than 2,000 defeated troops there, they should be able to resist. If possible, I hope your clan can also contribute. This time, Hiruzen was going all out. If these 1,000 Sarutobi ninjas were all to perish, then the Sarutobi clan would suffer a crippling blow. However, if they won, then those who had followed Kazuki onto the battlefield would, under Hiruzen's instruction, have many of them become Kazuki's direct subordinates. I can also dispatch 100 people to go with them. Koharu gritted her teeth and said, you know, my clan is just a small clan, far too different from your Sarutobi clan. The Sarutobi clan was once a major clan, second only to the Senju, Uchiha, and Hyuga clan. Ever since Hiruzen became the third Hokage, the Sarutobi clan had been deliberately concealed, infiltrating various aspects of Konoha. Although their reputation wasn't too prominent, these people were the foundation for Hiruzen's rule. Even Hiruzen's own son, Shinosuke, was currently carrying out missions in the Umbu, and not many people knew about him. That's enough. We'll then arrange for Ino, Shika, Cho to help. The Kirigakure battlefield won't be a problem. Hiruzen nodded slightly. Alright, let's go to the meeting. When Kazuki arrived at the Hokage office, many people were already in the conference room. The heads of various clans, leaders of various departments, and even many jonin who remained in the village were there. Upon seeing Kazuki, many people's eyes showed curiosity. Although Kazuki had not been in Konoha for the past year, his legends were everywhere in Konoha. With Hiruzen building momentum for Kazuki, his reputation was exceptionally great. Many people regarded him as Konoha's future pillar, and some clan heads understood that Hiruzen had probably already started paving the way for him. It wasn't that Orochimaru was incapable, but that Kazuki was too powerful. Only Ryoma and others looked at Kazuki with complex expressions. Although they had been building momentum for Fugaku, Kazuki had the Hokage's support. Not long ago, after I gave the order, Kazuki led his Umbu squad, infiltrated Kirigakure, released the Three Tails, and caused immense destruction to Kirigakure. Hiruzen dropped a bombshell. Everyone looked at Kazuki in disbelief. They knew he was strong, but they hadn't expected him to be this strong. He released the Three Tails and was able to retreat unscathed. Just how strong was he? This was truly one person against an entire village. Kazuki had achieved it. His strength had definitely surpassed Hiruzen, and it was unknown who was stronger between him and Mito. Ryoma's gaze was fixed on Kazuki. Releasing the Three Tails, he probably also controlled the Three Tails. Kazuki had awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan. Chapter 182, Just a Kage. Ryoma had always been concerned about Kazuki, not because Kazuki was a traitor who lacked the Uchiha clan's backbone and chose to side with the Hokage faction. In reality, no one had the right to criticize anyone else. They, as Uchiha, didn't they also stay in Konoha and not follow Madara? The so-called Uchiha's backbone was insignificant in the face of self-interest. They could slander Madara and demonize him for their own rights, and similarly, they could oppose Kazuki and make things difficult for him within the Uchiha clan for their own benefit. If Fugaku could become Tsunade's student and then have the qualification to compete for Hokage, then Ryoma would not say that Fugaku was a lackey of the Hokage faction, but rather that Fugaku was a bridge between the Uchiha and the Hokage faction, and the pride of the Uchiha. But there was no way, since Kazuki was not his son. Previously, he could continuously weaken Kazuki's influence, but if Kazuki had awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, that legendary eye, then many of the Uchiha's neutral faction might turn towards Kazuki. Coupled with Kazuki's influence in the village, what would Fugaku use to compete with Kazuki for the position of Uchiha clan head? Ryoma wished for the clan head position to be inherited by his son, and in the future, by his grandson. He wanted only his descendants to become clan head. Regarding how to eliminate Kazuki, this unstable factor, Ryoma didn't know how to proceed for a while. However, without our knowledge, the third Mizukage and Three Tails arrived at the Land of Fire front line almost simultaneously and launched an attack on our front line positions. Under Hamura's leadership, although Konoha ninjas resisted fiercely, there were also huge losses. Following this, Hiruzen's words echoed in everyone's minds like a clap of thunder on a clear day. What? Ryoma slammed the table, his eyes instinctively displaying the three-tomo Sharingan, staring intently at Hiruzen. Hokage-sama, is this true? Fugaku was still at the front line. He then immediately looked at Kazuki not far away, suspecting that this matter was related to him, using Kirigakure to eliminate Fugaku. Otherwise, it wouldn't be such a coincidence. Kazuki and his team probably already knew that the third Mizukage and Three Tails were not in Kirigakure, which is why Kazuki infiltrated Kirigakure, released Three Tails, and destroyed Kirigakure. But why didn't the village know this information? Clearly, this might be Kazuki's scheme. That is indeed the case. This past year, Kazuki's team has been continuously gathering intelligence on Kirigakure, and much of the intelligence was transmitted by Kazuki. However, intelligence within Kirigakure is difficult to obtain, especially information about the Mizukage, which is not something ordinary Kirigakure ninjas can know. Not long ago, Kazuki had just obtained information about Three Tails. I specifically tasked him with a mission to quickly resolve the Kirigakure front line, but I did not expect the third Mizukage to go to the front line. I need to bear some responsibility for this defeat at the front line. When Kazuki returned to Konoha, he immediately told me that the Mizukage and Three Tails were not in the village, but I did not notify the front line immediately. Hiruzen made this matter conclusive. With the Hokage's endorsement, others couldn't say much. Regardless, Kazuki destroying Kirigakure was a good thing for them, greatly striking at Kirigakure's fighting force. Such a thing, happening in other villages, felt pleasant. It would have been even better without the collapse of the front line. Hokage-sama, what are the losses at the front line? The losses are significant, so I plan to continue dispatching a large number of ninjas to the Land of Fire front line. Among them, the Sarutobi clan will dispatch 1,000 people, and the Mitokato clan will dispatch 100 people. Hiruzen then looked at Kazuki beside him and asked, Jonin Kazuki, do you have the confidence to defeat the Mizukage and Three Tails? Kazuki stood up with his arms crossed and said, it's just the third Mizukage and Three Tails, they are nothing compared to me. Please rest assured, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen really wanted to retort, what do you mean by, just the third Mizukage and Three Tails, and they are nothing compared to me? The Mizukage is, after all, a Kage of his level. However, considering Kazuki's strength, he had nothing to say. Moreover, at this time of widespread anxiety, Kazuki speaking in such a way could dispel everyone's worries. Good. I will transfer the personnel to you. You rest for one night and go to the front line as soon as possible. Other personnel will go to the front line first. Hiruzen anticipated that Kazuki was very tired now. After all, he had been active in the Land of Water for over a year, then released Three Tails, destroyed Kirigakure, and then brought so many people back to Konoha using Flying Thunder God. By now, he probably hasn't even had a good meal. Fortunately, Kazuki has the Flying Thunder God technique, so he can rest for one night and go directly to the front line tomorrow. Following this, Hiruzen was once again helpless. Who would have thought that Hamura would be so useless now? The former Hamura performed very well in their team, even stronger than an average elite jonin. Yet, when he encountered the third Mizukage, he was dealt with in a few swift moves, which left Hiruzen speechless. If Hamura had been as capable as Danzo, Konoha wouldn't have suffered such a defeat. Thinking of the loss of approximately 2,000 people or more, Hiruzen felt a pang of heartache. Those were Konoha's core forces. Chapter 183, One Against a Faction. Hokage-sama, I am willing to lead the Uchiha clan to the front line. At this moment, Ryoma stepped forward and said. He had no choice, his son, Fugaku, was still on the Kirigakure front line. He didn't know how Fugaku was doing now. Even with Hiruzen's endorsement, Ryoma still couldn't believe those words, everything was too coincidental. What if this was Hiruzen and Kazuki conspiring to harm Fugaku? The Hokage needed an obedient Uchiha, and Ryoma was very suspicious that Hiruzen, that old man, would want to help Kazuki get rid of Fugaku. At that time, Hiruzen would be able to get an obedient Uchiha. No need. The Uchiha and the entire Konoha military police force need to maintain the safety of the entire Konoha. Hiruzen said in a deep voice, staring at Ryoma. At this moment, he didn't want the Uchiha clan to act recklessly. Of course, if the Uchiha who stood with Ryoma could be eliminated during this opportunity, he would be happy to see it happen. But it wasn't the right time yet, and he didn't know when Kimogakure would declare war on Konoha. That's right, in Hiruzen's heart, one day Kimogakure would also declare war on Konoha. As for their previous cooperation, that was nothing. When it came down to it, other villages would also drag Kimogakure into the fray. Before, they only said that during this great ninja war, Kimogakure would stand with Konoha, but couldn't that simply end when this great ninja war was over? For example, as long as all other villages temporarily ceased hostilities, then Kimogakure could declare war on Konoha. Although this was a bit despicable and shameless, theoretically, it was possible, and Kimogakure was simply put, a bandit hideout. In recent years, while other villages were fighting amongst themselves, Kumogakure had been watching from the sidelines, and their strength was recovering at an extremely fast rate. Many missions that were originally for other villages were now being given to Kumogakure, which caused Hiruzen to have a slight hidden worry. If conditions allowed, he would want to go to war with Kumogakure himself to weaken their strength. At that time, letting the Uchiha clan charge to the front would also be good. After all, these guys weren't good at other things, but they were very good at fighting. If the clan head is worried about his son, I can send him back to Konoha immediately after I go to the front line. Seeing that Ryoma was about to say something else, Kazuki said with a slight taunt. Everyone else looked at Kazuki and Ryoma. Here it comes, finally. They had wondered how Kazuki and Ryoma would get along after this, and if they would directly start fighting in the Hokage meeting room. Everyone wasn't stupid, they knew about the internal situation of the Uchiha clan. Kazuki seemed to be impatient. Ryoma. What does he want him to say? Is he worried about Fugaku? That would be an embarrassment to Fugaku. There were also many clan heads here who had sent their children to the front line, but if only Fugaku returned, it would be hard to guarantee that others wouldn't say anything. What? Is your Fugaku more precious? Kazuki. What is your attitude? Ryoma looked at Kazuki with cold eyes, but in just a blink of an eye, he felt an incredibly powerful ocular power coming from Kazuki's eyes. His three-tomo Sharingan was completely crushed, and a soul-tearing pain made him cover his head and wail. This is my attitude. The Uchiha clan has always been for the capable. It was like this 1,000 years ago, and it was like this before Konoha was established. Ultimately, you are just trash who stole the position of Uchiha clan head. Don't speak to me from above. When I return from the front line, I will challenge all of you. Don't run away, this is a tradition of the Uchiha clan. Kazuki scanned everyone and then added, some traditions have been passed down for 1,000 years and are still very meaningful to continue. Of course, my intention is for me to challenge everyone in this faction by myself. Being looked at by Kazuki like that, many people couldn't help but shrink their necks. They hadn't expected that Kazuki would knock Ryoma down with just a glance before Ryoma even did anything, which made many people present very uncomfortable. After all, many people present were clan heads or people in high positions. Now, a young man appeared, wanting to overthrow the hierarchy at such a young age, which inevitably made them feel uncomfortable. However, Kazuki's words made them silent. This was the Uchiha clan's 1,000-year tradition. Upon careful thought, it seemed that during the Sengoku era, the Uchiha clan's head was always the strongest person or the strongest faction. Kazuki wanted to challenge Ryoma's entire faction by himself, and they couldn't say anything against it. At the same time, they were also shocked by Kazuki's strength. Looking at Kazuki, it seemed that challenging that faction was just a matter of flipping his hand, and looking at Hiruzen, it seemed that Kazuki could really do it. So, to what level had Kazuki grown? Ranking by seniority was what the vast majority of people advocated, but when a person's strength is enough to challenge everyone, then their power is worthy of respect. Ahem, let's talk about this after we return. Hiruzen quickly waved his hand, signaling Kazuki to rein it in a bit. But at the same time, he was also shocked by Kazuki's strength. Ryoma was definitely not weak. Before Kagami had awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan, his strength was even subtly above Kagami's. But now, Ryoma, with his Sharingan active, was knocked out by one of Kazuki's Genjutsu. Hiruzen didn't even know how to properly complain about Ryoma. Kazuki had only used his three-tomo Sharingan. Right, I need people from the Nara clan to handle some miscellaneous tasks for me. Kazuki thought for a moment, then requested of Hiruzen. Hiruzen glanced at the current clan head of the Nara clan and nodded slightly, saying, all right, I'll assign Shikaku and them to you. I imagine you two aren't strangers. All right. Shikaku and I are old acquaintances. A joyous smile appeared on Kazuki's face. This was a top-tier tool. Originally, he had planned to train Mikoto and Minato to handle these matters, but this time, he didn't plan to bring them, and besides, they were too young and couldn't command respect. But Shikaku was different. Just the title of young clan head of the Nara clan would be enough. Chapter 184, Kushina and Nawaki. Shikaku was destined to become Konoha's strategist, and Kazuki had long targeted him as a tool. Previously, it wasn't very convenient to have excessive contact with them, even though they were all part of the Hokage faction. After all, Kazuki was an Uchiha. But now, with Hiruzen pulling the strings, it's clear that he is paving the way for Kazuki, and also for Ino, Shika, Cho. As early as the Sengoku era, the Ino, Shika, Cho, these three second-tier clans, were followers of the Sarutobi clan. The Ino, Shika, Cho combination needed the Sarutobi clan to acknowledge it. This generation's Ino, Shika, Cho was even personally nurtured by Hiruzen. In a sense, it wouldn't be an exaggeration for Shikaku to call Hiruzen his teacher. Since the plan was for Kazuki to become the future Hokage, it was inevitable that Kazuki would come into contact with Ino, Shika, Cho. Although Shikaku was still young and his strength wasn't top tier, his intelligence was among the best in Konoha. Now that he was still young, he could be arranged to be by Kazuki's side, becoming his right-hand man. In this era, being powerful isn't enough. To govern Konoha well, talent is also needed. Could Kazuki really use his Sharingan to control everyone to do things in an orderly fashion? The main reason for establishing the one country, one village system in the first place was precisely because there weren't enough talented ninjas. Most ninjas couldn't even read, so how could they govern a region? Thinking of this, Hiruzen gasped. The emergence of the Ninja Academy greatly reduced illiteracy. Some courses in the Ninja Academy were cultural classes that didn't have much effect on strength. Previously, Hiruzen had been somewhat dismissive, but now, thinking about it, could his dark-hearted teacher have been preparing to eliminate the daimyo's side all along? You know, the current daimyo and the Senju clan are relatives. But thinking about his teacher's actions, let alone relatives with no blood ties, even those with blood ties could be betrayed at any time, as long as it benefited him in Konoha. Grandma Mito, Kushina, tomorrow morning, I'm going back to the front line. Kazuki said after returning to Mito's residence and explaining the situation at the front. Then he looked at Nawaki and said, Nawaki, this time, you don't need to come to the front line with me. Just stay in the village and keep Grandma Mito company. Kazuki thought of Nawaki's bizarre death by stepping on an explosive tag in the original timeline, and he admonished Nawaki again, if you want to go to the front line, there will be opportunities in the future. What you need to do now is to quickly get stronger. Nawaki was not weak. Combined with same hata, he could even fight a jonin, which made him an outstanding individual among his peers. Kazuki didn't want Nawaki to die. Sometimes, external enemies aren't the most terrifying. Instead, internal parasites are the most fatal. Danzo was one of the suspects Kazuki had in mind. Kazuki couldn't believe it if Nawaki's death had absolutely no connection to Danzo. After all, Danzo's character was problematic, making one unable to help but suspect him. Huh. Nawaki looked at Kazuki somewhat helplessly. To make him watch Kazuki and the others fight on the front lines while he foolishly stayed in the village, Nawaki found it somewhat difficult to accept. There's nothing more to say. You two will stay in the village for a while and train hard to get stronger. When the time is right, I will take you to the battlefield. Are you afraid there won't be time for experience? Kazuki gave Nawaki an exasperated look. That's good. I'll be waiting for you in the village. Nawaki breathed a slight sigh of relief. He didn't like war, but if it was a fight against Kirigakure, he would absolutely not hold back. Moreover, this was all for the sake of protecting Konoha. It was also a good opportunity for him to thoroughly practice the water release ninjutsu left behind by Tobirama. Kazuki then ruffled Kushina's hair and said softly, Don't worry, I'll resolve the battlefield in the land of water as quickly as possible. As he spoke, Kazuki's heart was filled with anticipation. Since he hadn't gone to the battlefield immediately, he wondered how Hamura and Fugaku were doing. Had they died? He hoped the third Mizukage and Six Tails would be more effective. Kazuki had realized that Hiruzen and Koharu no longer intended to obstruct the inevitable. Now, they were even promoting his affairs. For him, this was a good thing. Giving them advisor positions in the future was not out of the question, as long as they didn't try to dictate to him. Hiruzen might be overly fond of power in the future, but at this stage, he was still a wise man who knew when to adapt. However, Danzo and Hamura were staunch anti-Uchiha individuals. Kagami actually had a good relationship with them, and as long as Kazuki didn't compete for Hokage, they wouldn't target him. But once Kazuki might lay claim to the Hokage position, then the two of them would become obstacles for Kazuki. They had caused Kazuki no small amount of trouble over the years. He hoped his uncle Hamura would safely survive. As for Fugaku, Kazuki was somewhat curious about how the situation would unfold. If Fugaku had been stimulated too early and awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan, that would be interesting. Kazuki, come back soon. Kushina was a bit reluctant for Kazuki to leave the village so soon after just returning. However, Mikoto and Rinka would all remain in the village, and Kushina wouldn't be lonely. Moreover, this time, Kazuki had also brought some Uzumaki. She wanted to interact well with these clan members and ensure they could grow up safely in the village. 40 advanced chapters on. Chapter 185, Fugaku's Misunderstanding. Be careful. Mito's thoughts were complex as she admonished Kazuki. Both she and Kazuki knew that the situation in Kirigakure was most likely related to Madara, but neither of them intended to reveal it. They also didn't know what Madara would do when Kazuki went to the Kirigakure battlefield, but they still had to be careful. I understand, Grandma Mito, and besides, he's no longer match. Kazuki said with full confidence. Madara was indeed powerful, but he wasn't nothing either. Arrogance is still not acceptable, you are not invincible yet. Mito still admonished him worriedly. Now, Kazuki's opponent was the Sage of Six Paths. She might need to research some ninjutsu specifically for protecting souls. If the Sage of Six Paths wanted to take over Kazuki's body, that was something she absolutely could not accept. I understand. Kazuki nodded slightly. He naturally wouldn't take Mito's concern for granted, but there weren't many people he truly feared now. Madara should no longer be his match, and as for Hagoromo, if it was just his soul, it seemed he couldn't defeat him either. Wait, I'll have someone bring you food. After you eat, get a good night's rest. Mito then said to Kazuki. In the past, Mito would have personally cooked for them, but in the last year or two, she had aged a lot, to the point where she no longer cooked. Fortunately, as long as Mito gave the word, someone would naturally deliver her meals. While Kazuki was enjoying a rare day of rest, the Konoha camp against Kirigakure was filled with whales. This was not the previous camp, it had been re-established in another location after the original main camp was destroyed. Nearly half of the ninjas were killed or injured in Kirigakure's massive attack, and many ninjas lost the possibility of continuing their career as ninjas, unable to maintain a normal life afterward. Fugaku lied inside his tent, staring blankly at the top of the tent. His cousin had died protecting him, and the Uchiha who had followed him also suffered heavy losses in this battle. Seeing those people sacrifice themselves one by one to protect him filled Fugaku's heart with anger, confusion, and hatred. He covered his eyes with his hands. His eyes were different from ordinary three-tomo Sharingan, he had awakened the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan of the Uchiha clan. But what use was it? The dead could not return. Most importantly, when Fugaku awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan, he clearly felt a powerful pupil power on Six Tails. Six Tails was being controlled by someone, or rather, by the ocular power of a Sharingan. Fugaku immediately thought of Kazuki. Kazuki was very powerful and had defeated the demigod Hanzo before. They had long suspected that Kazuki had awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan. Kazuki had been in the land of water for over a year, which was enough time for him to do many things. Only he could control Six Tails, and this time, their encounter with Six Tails' attack must be Kazuki's conspiracy. Thinking of this possibility, when Fugaku thought of Kazuki's name, his killing intent became almost palpable. Undoubtedly, Kazuki had been made a scapegoat for Madara this time. It was clearly Madara who controlled Six Tails, but Fugaku believed it was Kazuki's doing. However, this was precisely Madara's goal, to nurture Fugaku to deal with Kazuki was part of Madara's plan. What Madara didn't know, however, was that Kazuki had not awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan and didn't need to worry about going blind. He had already awakened the Rinnegan and had become an existence on his level, or even stronger than him. For Madara to want to train a proxy to contend with Kazuki, wasn't that just wishful thinking? However, neither Madara nor Fugaku knew these things. All they knew was what Kazuki wanted them to know. I cannot die here, I cannot let Kazuki's scheme succeed, and I cannot let him know that I have awakened my Mangekyo Sharingan. Fugaku quickly made his decision. Kazuki certainly had greater control over the Mangekyo Sharingan than he did, but he was confident that once he became familiar with these eyes, he would certainly not be inferior to Kazuki. Now he needed to return to the village, and only in the village could Kazuki not make a move against him. On the other side, Black Zetsu excitedly ran to Madara to report, Madara-sama, Fugaku has awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan. He awakened it. Did he witness his clansmen and relatives die before his eyes? Madara's expression was in a daze. Someone who could awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan was no ordinary person. Back then, he and Izuna had awakened their Mangekyo Sharingan upon witnessing their father's death. One person's death created two pairs of Mangekyo Sharingan. And Fugaku did not disappoint him, awakening his Mangekyo Sharingan. Fugaku now had the qualifications for him to train. Yes, he witnessed his cousin die while protecting him. Black Zetsu secretly pondered how to train Fugaku. Kazuki was Hagoromo's chakra Otsutsuki. Madara and Fugaku alone were not enough. If possible, Black Zetsu even wanted to wait until Kazuki died of old age first. After all, even Hagoromo was not the purest of the Otsutsuki. He was subject to birth, aging, sickness, and death. Those two rebellious sons were already dead now. However, Black Zetsu would not doubt Hagoromo's abilities, he was living in another way. Doubting Hagoromo was doubting Kagaya's abilities. Later you go and find a way to give him some guidance, for example, on how to use the Mangekyo Sharingan. After some thought, Madara instructed Black Zetsu, also, pay close attention to Nagato. Absolutely do not let Kazuki know about the Rinnegan. Kazuki's ocular power was very strong, this was what Madara was concerned about. His ocular power was probably not inferior to his own when he had first awakened the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. How did Kazuki manage to do it? Fortunately, the other party was still young, and he himself had already awakened the Rinnegan. Madara was confident that once his plan was complete and he revived, no one in the ninja world would be his match. Yes, Madara-sama. Black Zetsu nodded slightly. How do we further strengthen Fugaku? Especially the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, it's not that easy to obtain. It depends on Ryoma. That brat has had quite a bit of cunning since he was young. Although his strength isn't great, his mind is actually quite good. Moreover, his bloodline is good, he might even be able to awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan. At least, Fugaku is very important to him. Chapter 186, Treating the Injured. The next day, Kazuki washed up at home, then instructed Mikoto on some upcoming matters, before leaving the village alone. It didn't take long for him to arrive at the main camp using the Flying Thunder God technique. Looking at the main camp filled with injured, Kazuki was somewhat silent. Without hesitation, he bit his finger, slammed his hands on the ground, and a giant Katsuyu appeared outside the main camp. Kazuki, is something wrong? Katsuyu asked with some surprise, sensing the size of her summoned body. There are many injured here. I trouble you to help treat these injured. Kazuki requested, sensing the surrounding aura. Is that so? Then leave it to me, but this might require drawing your chakra for treatment. Katsuyu reminded, her tentacles twitching slightly. And I can only perform basic treatment. That's enough. Kazuki didn't refuse. As Kazuki and Katsuyu were speaking, an Umbu squad quickly arrived not far from him, surrounding him. Kazuki made an Umbu hand sign to them and simultaneously threw his appointment scroll to the leader. Kazuki actually knew the leader and had even spent a few years with him. It was the Umbu squad that had previously guarded Mito. It was said they were originally from the Senju clan. The task of guarding Mito was taken over by Kazuki's squad, and their mission had changed. He hadn't expected them to come to the Kirigakure battlefield. I didn't expect it to be you. After confirming Kazuki's appointment, the leading ninja breathed a sigh of relief. They were worried that Kirigakure might try something using this opportunity. I summoned Katsuyu to help with the treatment. As for the main force, they already departed yesterday. Kazuki said to the Umbu. By the way, what's your codename? Rika. The Senju clansman with the codename Rika replied. Since Kazuki had replaced Hamura as the commander of this front line and requested their cooperation in executing missions with Kazuki, it was fine for Kazuki to know their codename. These people were Kazuki's subordinates. Thinking back a few years, Kazuki was a rookie, but now, he had grown to such a height. Although Kazuki was an Uchiha and she was a Senju, Rika had no ill will towards him. She had watched Kazuki grow up, and moreover, Kazuki was Tsunade's student and had been nurtured by Mito since childhood. It could be said that Kazuki was a true insider. I hope you can cooperate with me from now on. Kazuki nodded slightly. It's only right. The arrival of the giant Katsuyu attracted the attention of most Konoha ninjas. However, once they knew that Kazuki had summoned Katsuyu to treat them, everyone somewhat reluctantly and justifiably allowed Katsuyu to treat them. Kazuki, led by Rika, arrived at Hamura's tent. Looking at Hamura, who had lost his right arm and was covered in wounds, Kazuki sighed softly. Regardless of what Hamura had done or how he usually disliked him, he had indeed managed to somewhat block the third Mizukage. No big problems, right? Kazuki asked Rika. His life was barely saved. The specific situation will depend on later. Rika glanced at Hamura. Hamura had indeed fought with his life. Give him the best possible care. After he stabilizes, send him to the village to recuperate. Kazuki said. Later, you all organize some people and come with me to deal with the Kirigakure ninjas within the Land of Fire. Kazuki began to sense the surrounding situation in front of Rika. Yes. Rika hesitated for a moment, then asked Kazuki, aren't we going to consolidate the defeated army first? No need. Kirigakure isn't too big of a threat. If the other side has 6 tails, it will only benefit me. Kazuki said, his 3-tomo Sharingan flashing in his eyes. I can control 3 tails to destroy Kirigakure, and I can also control 6 tails to fight. Rika instantly fell silent. This time, they had sensed the terror of the tailed beast. Perhaps against true powerhouses, tailed beasts are not as strong as imagined, but in crushing weaker opponents and large-scale wars, tailed beasts can act like natural disasters. In this battle, they had suffered huge losses due to 6 tails. No one could stop 6 tails, and moreover, Kirigakure, under the command of the third Mizukage, launched a large-scale invasion. Their numbers were inferior to Kirigakure, their strong individuals were inferior to Kirigakure, and the other side also had 6 tails. It was already a miracle that so many people could still be alive. Why didn't Kirigakure launch a large-scale invasion? Kazuki then asked, logically speaking, they should have continued their large-scale attack while you all suffered heavy losses. Why did they stop their offensive? Rika, facing Kazuki's question, shook her head slightly and said, we don't know about this either. Is it because I destroyed Kirigakure? Kazuki had some guesses in his heart, but he didn't voice them. Perhaps Madara was worried that he would control 6 tails and then use 6 tails to destroy the Kirigakure army. It's not impossible that he was worried about him figuring out his control over the third Mizukage. Kazuki nodded slightly, then headed towards Fugaku. He sensed Fugaku's chakra signature and regretted that the young clan head had not died. If Fugaku were gone, many things would be much easier. Given Fugaku's situation, if he were to abandon his right to inherit the clan, Kazuki wouldn't know what to do with him. Kazuki's arrival quickly caught Fugaku's attention. He looked at Kazuki, who stood at the tent entrance, his height already subtly surpassing his own, and his hair reaching his back. A flicker of hatred passed through his eyes, and then he asked, "Why are you here?" "I previously controlled Three Tails to cause some destruction in Kirigakure and had originally returned to Konoha to rest. I didn't expect you all to end up like this, forcing me to continue to the front line to fight." Kazuki looked at Fugaku meaningfully. Fugaku had probably awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan. He just didn't know what his ocular jutsu was. Chapter 187, Fugaku's misunderstanding deepens. Kazuki's words made Fugaku even more furious. Kazuki controlled Three Tails to destroy Kirigakure, which seemed to imply that he could also control Six Tails to attack them. In Fugaku's eyes, Kazuki was showing off, telling him that he, Kazuki, had done all of this, and there was nothing Fugaku could do about it. Damn Kazuki. If Fugaku had previously only considered Kazuki a competitor, now Kazuki was his sworn, irreconcilable enemy. He thought of his subordinates, his cousin, who had died protecting him, and the Uchiha who had died because they were willing to follow him. And the culprit behind all of this was the man right in front of him. But he couldn't show his anger in front of Kazuki, otherwise, the other party would definitely make him die mysteriously on the front line, or stage a scene where he will be found with dozens of kunai in his back, ultimately ruled a suicide. Kazuki gave Fugaku a deep look, then turned and left. Fugaku had awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, which seemed troublesome, but it was still just the Mangekyo Sharingan. Facing him, who had awakened the Rinnegan, the Mangekyo Sharingan couldn't make any waves, just like how Sasuke, even with the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan in the future, still felt powerless against Madara. Even though both were Indra Chakra reincarnations, the gap between them before and after awakening the Rinnegan was not small. Not to mention that Madara was inherently stronger than Sasuke. He just didn't know what Fugaku's Mangekyo Sharingan ability was. Unfortunately, Fugaku's Mangekyo Sharingan had no effect on Mikoto, otherwise, Kazuki would have wanted to keep his eyes as spare eyes for Mikoto. Even if Mikoto awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan in the future, Kazuki would still have to solve her eyesight problem. Otherwise, if Mikoto lost her sight, it would surely be very uncomfortable. Unfortunately, Fugaku and Mikoto had no blood relation, so even if he wanted to use his eyes, he couldn't do so properly. Watching Kazuki's departing back, Fugaku clenched his fists. He has to leave the front line as soon as possible, otherwise, he won't even know how he will die. The Mangekyo Sharingan is powerful, but not invincible. News spread quickly in the ninja world, and Tsunade and Orochimaru soon received intelligence from the Kirigakure front line. Releasing Three Tails to destroy Kirigakure, but I didn't expect the third Mizukage and Six Tails to arrive at the front line, catching Konoha off guard. Orochimaru said, holding the message, his gaze deep. At first, he also suspected that Kazuki might have done this on purpose, but after careful thought, Orochimaru dismissed the idea. Kazuki didn't need to do that. With his current strength, dealing with Hamura was not a problem, and dealing with Fugaku was even less so. As long as he proceeded systematically, the position of Uchiha clan head was his for the taking, and the position of Hokage was the same. It seems there's trouble over there. Tsunade raised an eyebrow, wanting to do something, but neither she nor Orochimaru could do anything. War made people grow quickly. After a few years, both Tsunade and Orochimaru had significantly gotten stronger. At least when facing the third Kazekage, they could fight him evenly together. This was something they couldn't have imagined before. After all, the third Kazekage's strength might not be inferior to Hanzo's, but now they could cooperate to fight on equal footing with the third Kazekage, which was a huge step forward. If Jiraiya were also here, they could probably defeat the third Kazekage. As for the other Kage-level individual in Sunagakure, Tsukumo was left to deal with her alone. In terms of strength, Tsukumo might not be superior to Chiyo, but he was the bane of puppeteers. Tsunade knew that there might be many casualties in Kirigakure. She was willing to help but was powerless, at least the Sunagakure battlefield could not do without her. Fortunately, there was still Kazuki. With his strength, he should be able to solve these troubles. Orochimaru said with emotion, yes, it is indeed a bit troublesome. Sensei has made Kazuki a commander and assigned him many troops, including many members of the Sarutobi clan, Udatane clan, and Ino, Shika, Cho. It seems Sensei is paving the way for the future. His strength is too great. Losing to him in competition isn't your fault. Tsunade patted Orochimaru's shoulder. After all, Orochimaru was her good friend who had grown up with her since childhood. She didn't want there to be any conflict between Orochimaru and Kazuki, even though they had discussed this a long time ago. However, the support Kazuki was receiving now was something Orochimaru hadn't had before. I have no dissatisfaction. Tsunade, if it were me, I would also support Kazuki becoming Hokage. Orochimaru looked at Tsunade seriously. I am completely convinced by Kazuki. Neither Sensei nor Kazuki have wronged me. I'm just thinking that some people might be furious, and besides, all of this is happening too quickly. Through this war, Kazuki will gain the recognition of the vast majority of people. After all, he saved the Kirigakura front line by turning the tide. Danzo. Now Hamura will be severely weakened even if he doesn't die. Tsunade pursed her lips. I don't know why those guys have so much malice towards Kazuki, even though they were teammates with Kagami back then, and Kagami helped them a lot in battle. Forget it, as long as that brat Kazuki doesn't go too far later, with Sensei and our restraint, he won't become Madara. Orochimaru nodded slightly, agreeing with Tsunade's words. Alright, we should consider solving the problem of the Sunagakure battlefield. While such a prolonged war is beneficial to the overall situation, it is also consuming Konoha's vital forces.